with some, real pump up music for them. The lights are blaring on the escort cars, and it's a really exhilarating time.
Did you rock out?
Oh yeah, certainly. Got to get pumped up. That launch was actually at night, which I think allows you to get even more pumped up with the lights and the music in the darkness. But beautiful weather day for what we're doing today. Can't complain. Speaking of the weather, Daryl, I'm glad we have such a sunny day because on that walkout, not sure if you knew about this, but Nicole Ayers, call sign Vapor, she is actually very anti-umbrella, stemming back
Oh,
to her days in the Air Force. I guess it's an Air Force flight, an Air Force jet pilot thing, where they're too tough for umbrellas, so they have to really stick it out no matter what the conditions are. And apparently, Vapor is very religious about this. Even no matter where she is, even if she's off duty, she will not use an umbrella. Some people say that also carries over to all the military branches,
uh-huh.
but I talked to some Navy pilots last night, and they say no way, like certainly not. They use umbrellas, and even Anne told me today that she wasn't even aware at all about this thing about umbrellas. So I think it's really just Vapor, at least on this crew, and definitely an Air Force thing.
Which is interesting because the closeout technicians have umbrellas with them when there is a little bit of rain or mist in the air. And
Right.
so their job is to immediately cover and keep those suits dry. So I would be curious to see what Nicole
Yeah,
would do.
you got to protect that suit,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what I mean. A good thing we have no rain today, because I don't know what Vapor would have done.
Right, right. Well, this was a nice moment here where the family and loved ones got to come up close to the open window of the vehicles as they are just minutes away from leaving and departing the ONC. In the first vehicle, you've got the closeout lead and two suit technicians. In the second one, the commander and pilot, along with a flight surgeon. And in the third, the two mission specialists. They're getting a wave out the window as they drive off.
Here they
Core
go.
on countdown. Crew have left the ONC on the way to the pad. We're on schedule.
And we are off. The crew on their way to Space Launch Pad 39A. Driving away from the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building. This begins the 20-minute drive with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center, including, they'll get ready to do a drive-by the VAB, as we all know.
I think once we see them get going on the other road here, they're going to get up to like 65 miles per hour or so, which I think they're cruising along and in pretty close proximity of each other.
That's more than the posted speed limit. I just want to let you know.
Special day, absolutely. I know we don't really speed when we drive here at KSC, right? You're too
No, you
afraid
don't
of
want to
getting
do
pulled
that.
over, but this is a special
You'll
day
see that
for it.
guy on your tail.
I'm sure Anne loves the helicopter escort as well. She's a helicopter pilot, so sweet sounds of home. And as they get up to speed here, I bet she's really jamming out. Anne's mom told me that back in high school, Anne accumulated so many speeding tickets that she almost had to do some defensive driving courses. So she has a need for speed.
Spilling the tea on the commander. I like it. Speaking of Anne, let's find out more about her in her own words. Here now, Commander Anne McClain.
When I get asked why we explore, oftentimes I think, what would our society look like if we didn't explore? What would our society look like if we didn't ask what was over the next hill, what was across that ocean, and for us now, what's beyond our planet? My name is Colonel Anne McClain, and I'm the commander of NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. I was 3 years old when I first told my family that I wanted to become an astronaut, and I'm fortunate that no one of my family told me that it was impossible to do. They all said, that's going to be a lot of work, and they were right. But they were ready to support me every step of the way. They reminded me of my dreams if I started to get discouraged, because it is a long and challenging road. One thing I knew about becoming an astronaut is that not a lot of people get to do it. It was important to me to choose a career that I was going to love and be fulfilled in, regardless of my selection to becoming an astronaut. So I chose to serve my country as a helicopter pilot and an officer in the United States Army. I still am an active duty officer in the Army. It's something that brings me a lot of meaning to be able to serve the American people in that manner. And it's something that I would be doing still every day if I was not fortunate enough to wear this blue suit. This is my second flight to the International Space Station. I think on your first flight, there's a lot of unknowns, right? You don't know how it's going to feel to go to space. You're very focused on making sure that you know your stuff. On this flight, as the commander, I'm really focused on building a cohesive crew. So over the last year and a half, I've had the pleasure of working with my crewmates on Crew-10, Tak, Nicole, and Kirill. We've shared a lot of meals together, we've traveled together, we've done some tough sims together, and they are three very special people to me. And now we get to go launch to space and do this incredible mission with our good friends. The International Space Station is a proving ground for a lot of technologies for deep space exploration, but it is also a national orbiting laboratory where the U.S. can work with universities, research labs, other countries to develop things that benefit us on Earth, everywhere from cancer research, Parkinson's research, materials research, and at the same time, we're looking at the things that we're going to use on Mars and future moon missions. In my career at NASA, and especially on my first space flight, there were certain moments that I had, like when I came out of the hatch on my first spacewalk, where I realized we are operating at the edge of what humans are capable of. And that is such a special moment. I think it's that intersection of the magical and the technical, where I can look across the amazing beauty of the Earth, but I can see also this amazing creation, the International Space Station. And it doesn't belong to me or to NASA anymore, that it belongs to every single human on Earth. It's our platform to figure out how we got here, or where we're going in the future, and the context in which we live. Our goal is to be a beacon of hope for all of humankind, so that people can look and say, this is what we can accomplish when we work together.
The next member of Crew-10 we'd like to hear from now is pilot Nicole Ayers.
Space exploration is so important for humanity. You know, we learn so much as we get further away from Earth. Every time that we make a further step, we learn something and we learn how to adapt, and that is so important to humanity. We are explorers, each and every single one of us. My name is Major Nicole Vapor Ayers, and I am the pilot on NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. As a little kid, I always wanted to be an astronaut from the time that I was about knee-high. Growing up in Colorado really inspired me to go explore. I loved exploring in the mountains and learning how to camp and hike and live in a weird and exciting environment. Growing up as a twin is probably my favorite part of growing up. You have this built-in best friend to get in trouble with, to go exploring with. We grew up right there in Colorado Springs. We got to see the Thunderbirds fly over the Air Force Academy every year, which really inspired me to become a pilot in the Air Force. I always had an affinity for the sky and for space. Being next to the Air Force Academy kind of was the natural path for me. So I was a very serious little kid who set my goals really high and worked really hard and never got bumped off that path. I got my wings in August of 2014, and then I flew F-22s in Alaska, got to do some great flying up there in the mountains. I had a no-notice 6.5-month deployment. From there is when I moved down to Houston to start my job as a NASA astronaut. Crew-10 is a group of pilots who are going to space together to execute science and maintenance. We are about to launch to the International Space Station for a 6-month rotation aboard the orbiting laboratory. We've got a great group of humans who are funny and caring and kind and also wicked smart and capable and efficient. Our major goal is to get to the space station, execute the mission as well as we possibly can, and then come home still funny, kind, and caring about each other. Doing science in space is so important because here on Earth, there's gravity and it's a force that holds things down, and in space we can remove that force. And so we get a glimpse into processes and forces and structures that are too small or too weak and they can't actually flourish here on Earth. Long duration spaceflight is so important for human research to figure out how humans adapt and what happens to your body in microgravity. We get to learn how hardware and plants react in space, and we get to put them in this environment that's pretty harsh. You know, we're outside of the atmosphere, and now we don't have the protection of the atmosphere. What happens to those things, and how do we fix them, and how do we better prepare our people, our hardware, our food, our water systems for that deep space exploration? Throughout all of our training, it's been apparent to me that there is a massive humanity that gets us to space. It takes a village to get us there. The International Space Station wouldn't be where it is today without the international cooperation, and it's just blown me away with how many people it takes to get to space. From Crew-10, we just want to say thank you.
And you see them passing the VAB now, where we just had a big major milestone in the NASA Artemis program. Engineers finished stacking the twin solid rocket boosters on the inside of that very building that you see there for Artemis 2. The big rocket doors there. And there you have the view of those twin solid rocket boosters, 177 foot tall. They provide most of the 8.8 million pounds of thrust needed to launch 4 astronauts on a 10-day lunar journey. Since November, crews have used a massive crane to lift and assemble 10 booster segments, each packed with avionics and motors that will safely detach after launch. With the boosters now complete, the focus shifts to integrating the SLS core stage in the coming weeks. Artemis 2 will carry NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Christina Cook, along with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, on a mission around the moon. And now here is Jeremy, there in the back, with an update about a recent training mission for him and his fellow Artemis 2 crewmates.
Hey everyone, I'm Canadian Space Agency astronaut Colonel Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist for the Artemis 2 mission. I'm here at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas, where we normally do most of our training. But every once in a while, we like to change it up a bit. Reed, Victor, Christine, and I recently spent several days in Iceland trading in our spacesuits for hiking gear to study its geology and surroundings. Why Iceland? Well, as you can see, it has a similar landscape and terrain to the moon, with various volcanic rocks like basalts and breccias, and has limited to no vegetation. The Nordic island has been a lunar training site for NASA astronauts since the days of the Apollo missions. My crewmates and I teamed up with scientists and geology experts to explore the huge boulders, formations, and volcanic craters across the lava fields. During our journey, we stopped at various spots to discuss what we observed.
Some of the really fine material is compacting into what's like the glue holding this together.
And even tested different types of tools to collect rock samples. Although we won't be landing on the moon during our mission, this field work and navigation practice will allow us to make informed observations when passing the lunar surface and pave the way for future Artemis crew training. And that's your Artemis Moon Minute.
For more Artemis updates, scan the QR code on your screen that you see right here. There it is. Scan that QR code or visit nasa.gov/Artemis 2 to get the latest updates as we get escorted across the Kennedy Space Center. Security leading the way.
There they go. They're up to top speed now, I bet.
You got a little construction they're coming up on, but and it's a two-way road, but there's no problem there. They've already pre-cleared it for them to go by. Another interesting note that we get to see when we have a daylight launch is those crawler tracks that you see just to the top of the screen. You know, those two rock-bedded crawler tracks, that's where the SLS rocket and Orion spacecraft will slowly march its way out to the launch pad, the giant crawler transporter. You know, there's river rock down there, just a massive track of river rock that allows, there's a great shot of it, that allows the crawler transporter to carry many, many millions of pounds of Artemis hardware out to the pad.
Special rock, too. I think it's from Tennessee or something.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Riverbed of Tennessee. It's known for its qualities of low friction. So it doesn't spark or build up heat as much as some other rock. So it was chosen for that very reason. Nice job.
Luckily, no alligators out on the road today, because that does happen from time to time.
It does indeed. Alligators, wild boar. And this is always my favorite. You have a rocket in your front windshield. Say, hey, I'm getting ready to fly on that. There it is. There it is, guys. There's our ride.
Yeah, definitely an exhilarating feeling right now as they're coming up that incline with in view of their rocket. It's getting real right now, Daryl.
Yep, yep. It's getting real again.
Again. You know, like you said, more clouds today, but they're really gorgeous in that image that we just had there, aren't they? Make for some spectacular photos, I think, of a liftoff.
Absolutely. And we have lots of press out here, very talented photographers who document the launch and the
Core on
liftoff.
countdown. Crew have arrived at the pad on schedule.
I'm always amazed at how they're able to incorporate the environment around the rocket as it's flying, whether it be a moon or a cloud. They do a great job. We enjoy their imagery. Let's pick back up with finding out our crew and learning about them firsthand. Up next is JAXA astronaut and mission specialist Takuya Onishi. He is one of the Crew-10 mission specialists.
When people are born, they naturally want to explore their environment. That's how we expand our world, and that's how we find something new, advance our technology and civilization. My name is Takuya Onishi, and I am a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. I was born in Tokyo, in Japan, and I grew up mostly in the west part of Japan. My family moved our locations so often, so that experience actually helped me to get used to a new environment quickly and comfortably. I have always been interested in space since my childhood, but I never thought I would actually become an astronaut. I chose to become a pilot. I think I was very lucky because the experiences as a pilot of a commercial airplane really helped me to go through astronaut selection process. Space is hard, very challenging, sometimes unpredictable, and there is no 100% guarantee of success. And that's why I think cooperation is the key to success. Each country, each crew member, each agency, each company brings its own expertise and its strengths in order to be able to cooperate as a team. And I hope our Crew-10 mission becomes one of the best models of that cooperation. We've been training together more than a year. I believe we can be very successful in our goals and build a closer friendship among all of us. And of course, most importantly, have a lot of fun together. While we are on board the ISS, we are going to perform a lot of scientific experiments, including some medical experiments to better understand our bodies and for future space exploration. Our ultimate goal is to go to Mars, but it's not an easy journey, and when we face a new challenge, we must solve it step by step. Continue pushing the boundary of possibility makes us gain new skills and also enhance our experiences. What I like about the International Station program is each country brings its own strengths. It's like a patchwork quilt. Each country is just one patch. Putting all the patches together creates one beautiful quilt that is ISS.
And now our other mission specialist, Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.
I think that we explore because it's a really deep part of our nature. This is one of my things that makes us humans. My name is Kirill Peskov. I am a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. I grew up in a Siberian town called Nazarovo. It's in the middle of Russia, in the middle of Siberia. I decided to be a pilot. Actually, this was my dream during my childhood. And after becoming a pilot, I realized that it's not a limit and we can go higher and further. So I started to work towards becoming a cosmonaut, and now I'm standing here. Our crew is great. I love the fact about our crew that all four of us are pilots. I think that it helps us to understand each other really well, sometimes even without saying a word. Every day we learn something new about each other. The training itself, this is the thing which brings us closer. We do science in space because it's an environment that cannot be created on the ground, and it helps us to develop all kinds of materials, medicines. It helps us to push our knowledge forward. I think doing research is not only on station, but everywhere is somewhere deep inside in human nature. And this hunger for exploration, this is one of the main things which drives us forward and helps us to survive as a species. I think it's hard to overestimate the value of international cooperation in space exploration because it takes much time and effort, represented by how much money spent to space exploration. So, like, more people and more ideas we have, faster the exploration goes, and safer and better our life on Earth becomes. I love the space exploration because it's the endless process. When I became a cosmonaut, I was surprised how big this team is. The team who makes these flights possible. It is like thousands and millions of people, and what I would say is to say thank you, not only for airspace industries, industry agencies, but also for all the people who are involved in creating something and in different kinds of research. You are making the world better.
Back live now at the launch pad as your commander and pilot walk towards the elevator after taking a look at their rocket for the second time. Heading up the launch tower.
Getting into that special elevator, and I'm not sure, I'm guessing maybe Anne will get to push that button, but it's the best button in the elevator because it says space. No floor number, just space.
And today, she means it.
Yeah. I always love that image of the crew members leaning back and looking up at their rocket, really appreciating the gravity of what they're about to do and how tremendously powerful that rocket is there in front of them.
The elevator will take them almost several hundred feet up the launch tower, and they'll pop out right there. And then they'll have to walk a couple flights of stairs to get to the very top where the crew access are. Of course, this is historic hardware here, this launch infrastructure, as the elevator doors open. That was a fast ride.
There they are.
A little wave from Anne McClain.
Almost at the rocket. Still some stairs to climb.
That's right. The last climb. And we talk about how this, is a launch tower that went all the way back to Apollo and through shuttle. So that's why this, slight modification where the elevator doesn't quite go to the spot of this taller rocket where the spacecraft is and where the door and the hatch are. But a lot of history at these pads, both 39A and 39B, kicking off in the 70s with a historic launch, Apollo-Soyuz, that led to cooperation for the very place where they're going today, the International Space Station. International cooperation.
Yeah, that's right. Apollo-Soyuz, the 50th anniversary for Apollo-Soyuz will be this July when Crew-10 is on board the International Space Station as part of Expedition 73. Apollo-Soyuz was, of course, a 9-day mission, and it was testing the compatibility of the docking and rendezvous systems and the capacity for international space rescue, which I would say is incredibly impressive at that time because, of course, it was the Cold War, the Soviet Union, and they still were able to demonstrate that countries can work together in a peaceful way for a greater good of exploration and science, and even demonstrating that rescue capability if we had to help each other out in space. I always love that bit of history that, depends on where you're from. Some people call it Apollo-Soyuz, and in Russia they call it Soyuz-Apollo.
Of course they do. Well, beautiful shots here on the left-hand side of your screen. You can see our helo shot of the launch tower and tiny little astronaut there on the balcony.
Yeah, that's Kirill and Tak, and we just heard in Kirill's package that he's from Siberia. And I love this fact that his fellow colleagues told me. Even though he grew up in Siberia, he never saw a bear until he came to California for training. So that was his first bear, being from Russia and from Siberia. I thought that was a very fun fact.
And speaking of animals, here comes Animal and McClain on the right, and to the left, Nicole, Ayers making their way into their Dragon spacecraft Endurance. They signed the patch yesterday, so no need
Core on
to
countdown,
sign it
crew in
again.
the white room.
Our two mission specialists now ascending the stairs, right behind the commander and pilot.
And another commander coming up the stairs, since Tak will be the commander of the International Space Station once they arrive up there. So excellent experience for an experienced crew member like Tak to be in charge of the space station. And it's a really nice transfer of controls from McClain being the commander of the vehicle and then handing over to Tak, really giving both of those experienced astronauts a chance for leadership and a commandership.
And how can you not do what they're doing right now? Take in that view. Look out over the railing and just see what a beautiful Florida day it is.
It's an incredible view from up there. Usually a little bit windy, but man, every time I've been up there looking out, you can see the whole coastline, all the other launch pads, the VAB, really the entire Space Center, and it is simply gorgeous.
Maybe that wind is why one of them is standing a little off from the rail.
Yeah. You know, Kirill is actually no stranger to the U.S. either. He actually he was an exchange student in high school in Texas, actually. And there was a great story there. He went to the Johnson Space Center when he was here in high school, and he had some photos, some memorabilia from JSC that he had hanging up in his room when he was a high school student. And his host family in Texas is actually, I think they're still here. I know they were here on Wednesday for the launch. I'm assuming they stayed as well. So really cool connection for him.
That is very cool.
Core on countdown, crew ingress started, on schedule.
And they'll ingress the crew one at a time, being very careful when they step over that seal that surrounds the hatch. Very important to keep the environment inside. And here come our mission specialists down the crew access arm. Takuya Onishi and Kirill Peskov. We can see them on both sides of your screen there, from the outside and the inside. Love that shot.
Yeah, that seal that you were talking about, of course, incredibly important to the integrity of the vehicle. And, you know, there have been instances where even a hair or something can get in the seal and prevent the pressure integrity. But luckily they will do a pressure check to make sure it's all situated before liftoff. They can control for that. And this hatch actually won't be opened again until splashdown and recovery of the crew. So it'll remain closed for their entire mission.
Yeah, that's a great note there, because it's such a big deal when they close that hatch to know that door is going to be shut for months before it's opened again. While our commander and pilot are getting buckled in, why don't we take a social question? We've been taking them throughout the show. We thank you for submitting them. Chloe Bukeli asks, Jessica, what is your favorite part about the ride up to the International Space Station?
Well, it is an incredibly dynamic ride. You know, as you are launching in any rocket, I launched on the Soyuz rocket and the Soyuz capsule, so different than what we're seeing here today. But all of those launches involve, you know, the accumulation of the G-forces. You especially feel that kind of kick in the pants when the different stages of the rocket detach. I think my favorite part was, you know, only about 8 minutes, then you're in space. Everything in the capsule starts kind of lifting up, even anything that was on the floor, little bits of dust or anything that was dropped. Your pencil, your arms start lifting up, and everything is weightless. And I remember looking over at my crew. Oleg Skripochka, my commander, he had flown before, so it was familiar for him. But Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri, the very first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, it was his first flight, just like mine. And I remember looking at him, and his eyes were enormous, and both of us were just thinking, wow, like this is it. We made it to space.
Wow.
My journey to space was only 6 hours, or to the space station was only 6 hours. Now the Soyuz actually often does what's called a 2-orbit rendezvous, and they're there in only 3 hours. Today, these astronauts will actually be in this capsule for 28 and a half hours, so much different, considerably longer than the flight profile if they had launched on Wednesday. And that's just simply orbital mechanics. Depends on the time that you're launching, where the space station is relative to you, and all of these factors. So it could be a very short flight and could be longer. Really, that just kind of showing they'll have quite a bit more time to acclimatize to weightlessness. They'll probably have some really incredible views to look at, whereas, for me, it was all very, very fast. I never even got out of my seat.
How about that?
But they'll actually have a sleep period up there. They'll get out of their seats and suits pretty soon after they're in space. They'll go to bed for a while, and then they'll try to, get some rest and then wake up refreshed for the next day when they will be docking to the space station.
Yeah, I imagine that is something to really, there's something challenging about getting some sleep after you just launched to space in a spacecraft.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't had to do that yet, but I do remember when I got to the space station, you were pretty exhausted. It's a very long day. But your head is just going through so much. You have this whole new mapping of new neural networks as you're starting to navigate in a three-dimensional volumetric way of space, and it is very, very stimulating. I think my memories of those first few days are a little bit hazy just because of that. So it'll be interesting to see. I know we talked about that a little bit on Wednesday with Anne and Tak, both experienced astronauts. Generally we see the veteran astronauts emerge, and they look a little bit more graceful. I think because they've already had those neural networks formed. Even if they haven't used them in many years, they're already there. Whereas the rookie astronauts, Nicole and Kirill, they'll probably be a little bit less graceful as they kind of navigate and all of those mechanisms start coming into fruition.
That 28.5-hour transit to the International Space Station will put this crew on course to arrive at the International Space Station at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow, Saturday, March 15th. Let's take another social question now, Jessica, as we have all 4 crew members inside the Dragon Endurance now as they're getting settled in. Joe asks, what happens if the astronauts get direct sunlight through a window in the space capsule or on the ISS when they don't have spacesuits on regarding radiation exposure? This is a curious question because I was wondering that. You don't have the atmosphere, filtering the sun in any way.
Yeah, so some of the windows on the space station actually do have like a UV protection built into the window, just like, in your car or other types of windows, but some of them do not. So that's actually, my crew, I remember from training in Russia for the Russian segment, there are 2 of their windows that actually don't have that UV protection, and in training they really emphasize that to you so that you remember that, and you take some precautions if you do use those windows. We do have different types of sunglasses on board so we can help protect our eyes. We don't actually have sunscreen though, so you can put clothes on to have cover your skin with clothes, but you can get a sunburn through the windows. As far as radiation exposure, that is something that we have higher levels of radiation when we're on board the space station, and that's actually something that limits our careers as astronauts. We have radiation dosimeters on us at all times, and we're tracking those levels because we want to make sure that we don't go too far beyond a very high radiation limit that would, of course, then increase your chances of getting diseases like cancer.
That makes sense, and they use, I think, a metric comparatively speaking, for how much radiation you get for like how many dental x-rays you could get in a lifetime. Like it's a fair amount of radiation. So that's why they keep track of it.
Yeah, and the limit basically just is a certain threshold beyond which your chances of getting cancer are increased by a certain percent over the general population. So it's pretty conservative, but it is something that we track regularly because it is a concern. Of course, it'll be a much larger concern when we go back to the moon and eventually onto Mars. There we will be experiencing, on those journeys, we'll have much higher radiation levels than we do have in the low Earth orbit of the space station. So that is a very big topic of research in terms of human health and physiology and how to protect the astronauts. So, engineers are looking at what type of materials can you use to protect astronauts. Things like lead are the best protection, but of course launching lead would be sort of prohibitive. But you can use things like water, for example. So engineers have been pretty creative in thinking, can you line a spacecraft with water that will then be consumed throughout the mission and then replace it with any human waste instead to get that same level of protection. Definitely a big concern for those exploration missions further in the future.
That's pretty interesting. Thank you for that answer, Jessica. Really, really interesting. We got another question here queued up. MKO asks, what happens if a crew member gets sick at the ISS? I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that earlier. So we actually have pretty extensive medical supplies on the International Space Station, a lot of different medicines that we would need in any type of unanticipated situation. We have a defibrillator, and if anyone needed that in terms of if we had to do CPR, jumpstart somebody's heart. And, we don't always fly with a medical doctor. So, for example, no medical doctors on this crew right here. They will actually be joined by a medical doctor for Expedition 73. Johnny Kim will be a part of the Soyuz launch on April 8th, and he is a medical doctor. During my mission, I had Drew Morgan, so I had a medical doctor on board throughout my mission, but that's certainly not a requirement. It was something that made my mom happy to know that I was flying with a doctor, but not a requirement for us at NASA. And so what we do is we have pretty extensive medical training. We have CMOs, crew medical officers, at least one, but usually several on board throughout the mission, and we're trained for a medical emergency type situation so that we would know what to do. We would have a lot of support from the ground if we had anything happen. We would have flight surgeons on the ground that would be talking us through everything. And if we had a major emergency that we couldn't really take care of ourselves on the space station and was really urgent, we would just deorbit the person. We would be able to put them in the vehicle. This vehicle, this Dragon, will remain docked for the entire mission. It's their lifeboat if anything happened, whether it be an emergency on the space station or a medical emergency. We could bring a crew member home and they would be back on Earth in a few hours. So that is a kind of luxury that the space station affords. But again, when we talk about going back to the moon and to Mars, we will need to be a lot more autonomous in terms of how we take care of things, because we won't have that option of being back on Earth and being back in a hospital setting within a few hours. So a lot of stuff to think about there. As astronauts, we even do something now called field medical training, which is an incredible opportunity. I did this a couple years ago. We actually go into the active emergency rooms and operating rooms of some of the major hospitals in downtown Houston, and we get to ride along with the team and actually help participate in some of these medical procedures so that it gives us more of that real hands-on training where we're doing blood draws, possibly even intubating a patient, catheterizing a patient. So it's a really exceptional opportunity for us to get those hands-on training skills, because sometimes, in order to really have that confidence that you can do something like that, you have to do it. You have to have that muscle memory and that exposure. So just a testament to some of the different unique kinds of training that we receive as astronauts that can really help us throughout the mission.
I can imagine when you're getting ready to, do one of these procedures and say, hey, trust me, I can do this. I'm an astronaut.
Yeah, I mean,
wait,
it's
what?
pretty shocking sometimes. We're like, they're going to let us do this?
Right.
For me, I was a physiologist in my former life. I did a lot of medical procedures on animals for my research, so it's something that I'm pretty familiar with as a physiologist, and I love it. I really appreciate those types of opportunities. But then, sometimes the test pilots that we fly with, for example, some of them have very little exposure to that world and, might not be so fond of it. So it's nice to be able to expose everybody to that. When I did my field medical training, I did it along with Matt Dominic, who is a pilot, of course. And so it was a really nice juxtaposition of our very different skill sets from our former lives, and it was a great opportunity for us to work together and to learn a lot from that experience.
If I were going to Mars, I would certainly want Dr. Kim or Dr. Morgan going with me. I mean, that would be comforting for sure. Great answer, Jessica. Thank you very much for that. As we look at Crew-10, now seated in their capsule. Up next for them, we'll be rotating those seats up. I should say articulating their seats upwards so they can get into a heads-up position. A fist bump from the closeout crew to the flight crew as they make their way out of the capsule to begin evaluating the seal around the hatch. You know, we had a beautiful shot outside during the daytime as we look at the crew there huddled. We've been showing you the beautiful shots outside during the daytime, but there was a really cool shot last night during the blood moon. Check this out. Now this is time lapse, as you can see the shutter capturing the moon as it went by the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon spacecraft. So you can see in the middle there where it was a total eclipse, a total lunar eclipse. You know, this is where the sun, the moon, and the earth are all aligned, and the moon gets into the darkest part of Earth's shadow, and it gets that reddish look. And look at that! Like, what a shot that was.
Yeah, that is absolutely gorgeous. And we haven't had a total lunar eclipse visible here since 2022.
How about that?
So really a beautiful view that we had here throughout the U.S. and other places of this blood moon.
Dragon, Crew-10, good afternoon. We're in 4.100. We're complete through 1.3 and 1.4. We're ready for comm checks.
SpaceX copies and stand by for umbilical comm checks.
Each one of the crew members will now do a series of communication checks with the ground team.
Commander, pilot, MS-1, MS-2, comm check.
Loud and clear.
Clear. Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
And core, loud and clear. Umbilical comm check is complete. Report when ready for seat rotation.
Okay.
So you can see Nicole Ayers is reaching up there to the displays above her, and once their seats rotate back,
Dragon, step 1.7, ready for seat rotation.
SpaceX copies will report when initiating.
So once they rotate back, they'll have Anne and Nicole will have a direct view of those control panels that will be right in front of their faces. We can just kind of see the top of it there. That's where Nicole was reaching up. So they're all strapped in there with their seat belts and their 5-point harnesses, and even their boots have a little, kind of like a guide that they can slide onto.
Slot.
Yeah, it's a little slot, exactly. That, yeah, it slides onto the corresponding part on the little footrest. So that helps keep their feet in place. They
That
have
looks
what's
like, is that a paper checklist of some sort up there in the upper
Yeah,
left
they've
hand?
got some different checklists, and then they have on their left knees, they have what's called the satchel. So they have a few different things that they might need in those early phases of the mission in there, and they also have their crew tablets so they can be following along with procedures and different phases of the mission.
Just like a pilot to have a paper backup, though.
Always. Always. Redundancy is key.
Yeah.
I think that's...
Dragon, SpaceX, initiating seat rotation.
Copy.
I think with that cue card that we see there is probably their launch cue card, which has kind of their key trajectory and the key phases of that, the different corresponding abort sites if they would need to abort anywhere along there. And we'll actually hear them call out those different phases as they initiate the launch profile. And there they are rotating back to that position. You have a better view there of that display panel. Three sets of giraffe legs coming up there and one set of panda legs. Good view.
It's quite stark in this particular camera view.
Black and white, just like a panda.
There you go.
Dragon, SpaceX, seats are in the launch position.
And the two mission specialists, they have a better view of their window, looks like to me.
Yeah, that's one of the big differences. So, as I mentioned, I flew on a Soyuz, and the Soyuz has a fairing covering it for liftoff. So the windows essentially are covered until you jettison that fairing. Dragon does not have that. So these astronauts will actually be able to see their ascent away from the launch pad. And I've heard that that is incredibly beautiful, a very cool thing to see as you're lifting off. There's a little bit of what their view will look like, clearing the launch tower, perhaps seeing a bit of coastline along the way, depending on which way their windows will be facing. One of the things when you don't have that fairing like we have in Soyuz, apparently other astronauts have told me that it makes the Dragon much louder in those first few minutes because you don't have that additional layer of protection like you do on Soyuz.
That makes sense. A window much thinner than the rest of the capsule.
The astronauts also use those Dragon windows sometimes for photography and aurora viewing when they're on ISS. So you have, more windows to do exactly what astronauts like to do best when they're in space, is to look back at Earth, the incredible view of the Earth below them. It's really spectacular and never gets old.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for Section 2, suit leak check preparation.
Something every photographer can appreciate, having multiple different angles to take photos.
Yeah, and just the way that the windows on the space station are lined up, the angle that you get from those Dragon windows is really great for the aurora because you can see them coming from hundreds of miles away and get your cameras ready better than you can from some of the other windows. So, we've seen a lot of incredible photography, especially lately with astronaut Don Pettit on board.
Yeah, he does a great job.
Exceptional photographer. Definitely recommend checking out some of his imagery and that of other astronauts on social media or on the NASA website.
The cupola, does that look straight down?
It does, generally. In the attitude that we generally fly in on the space station, the cupola is facing directly down, and there's some other windows that are facing directly down as well. And then there are some that are kind of looking out at the sides, the ones that are in the Japanese module. So you get a few different vantage points. You also have some windows in some of the Russian modules that are not facing directly down as well. Taking photographs in space is not easy, though, so extra props for Don's incredible photos. Matt Dominic also took a lot of exceptional photos. Really, most astronauts do, but those two really kind of stood out. But it is difficult, especially because of lighting. The lighting is changing all the time when you're in your orbit, going around the Earth every 90 minutes, 16 sunrises and sunsets every day.
Changing quickly.
Yeah, changing all the time. So you think you have your settings perfect, and then suddenly the light changes. Suddenly there's some different shading from a cloud on the subject. There's all kinds of things that are changing all of the time, and that makes it really difficult to get that perfect photo or video.
I had never thought about that. Of course, on Earth, when you're trying to shoot photos in the dusk or dawn time and that light is changing quickly, it's a challenging time. But when you're going around the Earth every 90 minutes and the sun's zipping around...
Dragon, set 2.9, care complete, ready for leak checks.
That can really be challenging. So we got leak checks coming up right on time.
SpaceX copies. Your go for Section 3, suit leak check.
Please go for Section 3, suit leak check.
So we saw those leak checks earlier. Now one more round just to make sure things are good, their integrity is good now that they're strapped into their seats, because of course these suits are the things that will protect us if we had any depressurization of the vehicle for any reason. You know, throughout most of the mission, you're comfortably unpressurized in the suit, but the only reason why we wear the suits is, of course, to protect for that contingency case. If we did have an emergency, these suits would provide you with the pressurization you need in order to stay alive. So pretty important through all phases of the launch profile and also for landing.
And why they check it a second time, as you mentioned, because they did disconnect since doing that first test with their checkout at the astronaut crew quarters, and now they're plugged into the system in the capsule.
Right, in a different system. The system, of course, they used was just one in the building. This is their actual vehicle.
Right. If you're just joining us, it is T-minus 2 hours and 27 minutes and counting until Crew-10 launches to the International Space Station as part of NASA's Commercial Crew program. As you can see there, Crew-10 is strapped into their seats inside Dragon Endurance, waiting for their seats to lift off and take them spaceward.
Yeah, so these vehicles actually don't have a ton of cargo space when we have the astronauts on board. You know, most of our cargo comes up on the cargo vehicles. There is a Dragon cargo vehicle version, and we also have the Northrop Grumman Cygnus, and we have the Russian Progress vehicle. And that's how we get most of our supplies up there. We, in the past, have had a Russian vehicle called HTV, and now there's actually a new one during this mission that TAK will be able to capture, and it's called HTVX. So that'll be the first flight of that new cargo vehicle. But interestingly, you know, not a ton of other room on this vehicle with the crew. So their personal belongings are actually already up there. They've been up there for months. All of the clothes that they need, most of the food that they need, and that kind of thing. Personal things will already be up there. There's a small amount of items in this vehicle with them, maybe some more food, a few, very small amount of personal belongings. But really, the cargo comes up on those cargo vehicles.
And Anne McClain had written me in response to some questions that I had and mentioned that some of their personal gear will come up on SpaceX 32 in April, because this spacecraft is packed. One of the heavier spacecrafts recently in the history of the Commercial Crew program, packed with lots of food. One thing that's very important and needed up on the ISS is food and water. And so they had to make room for some extra food. And so some of those things will come a little bit later. She mentioned that some of those things were like personal gear.
Suit leak check complete. 4 nominal seats.
SpaceX copies and concurs. Closeout team will now perform final closeout steps next to the capsule. Proceed to Section 4, side hatch close, and report when ready to close the hat.
Copies will proceed to Section 4 and report ready for side hatch closure.
Anne McClain said that she packed some shirts from sports teams.
Dragon SpaceX, we got a question for MS2. Would Seat 4 like their Valsalva installed for launch?
Dragon, affirmative. We would like that Valsalva, thanks.
Copy the affirmative. Stand by 1.
So that Valsalva that they're talking about is a small device or small really block of foam that they will put into the helmet, and that just helps you if you can't clear your ears when you're changing pressures in the suit. Sometimes you can do that. Like I can just do that by swallowing, for example, kind of like when you're scuba diving. You know, sometimes you have to do a Valsalva maneuver where you plug your nose and create a little bit of pressure in order to clear your ears. So that's what they're talking about in spacesuits. In all types of pressure suits and spacesuits, we often have these Valsalva devices So you can lean your nose up against that device in order to block it and then get that pressurization that you might need to clear your ears.
Ah, interesting. I can, when I'm diving, just kind of do it. I guess some people can do it, just kind of
Yeah, exactly.
open up that, you feel it open up and the pressure releases. Of course, pressure's built up, so it'll easier to get it out.
For some people, swallowing or kind of massaging your eustachian tubes in your neck. And when I'm diving, I actually do have to physically hold my nose to do it. But when I'm not in a water environment, if I'm in a spacesuit, I actually don't need to use a Valsalva at all. I can just swallow or even kind of move my jaw. So I think it depends a lot on your physiology. Everybody's a little bit different. But for me, with the air interface versus the water interface, I think that makes a pretty big difference.
Right. So it's more like when you fly on a plane, right? And you get up 33,000 feet.
Exactly.
You feel your ears clear.
That is complete. Crew is ready for Section 4.
Core copies will be with you in Section 4.
A look outside from the press site. A historic site itself for the fact that countdown clock.
And Dragon SpaceX, for one more ask following that install for Valsalva, we'll look for affirmation that Crew is go for hatch closure.
Dragon Crew is go for hatch closure.
SpaceX copies. The closeout team is taking final steps in preparation for site hatch closure. Stand by for some state transitions before we get into pad hatch closed. A reminder at this time, ensure all items remain secure from now through launch.
Copies.
And there they are, removing the protective cover for that seal, so they're now ready to do an inspection of it and then get the hatch closed. This is the second launch attempt for Crew-10. There was a launch opportunity on Wednesday, but we stood down from that one due to some ground equipment. In the interim, though, between that attempt and this attempt, the astronauts had some extra time on their hands, and we were talking earlier about them going out to the beach house and, of course, having a variety of experiences for the crew. It's a time to relax, maybe a time to tell a few stories about their time in space between the two veterans, Sam McClain and
I
Takuya.
think one of the biggest things is really just appreciating and enjoying the elements on Earth. And it may be something that Ann and Talk thought more about than Nicole and Kirill, because sometimes you don't really think about it until you've experienced it. But, in space, one of the things that you miss the most is just the feeling of the breeze on your cheeks, the sound of the wind as it rustles through the leaves, the feeling of the warm sun on your skin. Those kinds of things you don't experience with like you do down here on Earth, and you suddenly realize how much you miss them. Mm-hmm. So hopefully out there yesterday at the beach house, they were taking that time. Certainly was a beautiful sunny day, and it was breezy on the beach as well. Yes. So hopefully they were thinking about that. It's not something that really occurs to you until you don't have it anymore. I remember from my mission, or even from when I used to do research in the Antarctic, when I would come home, there's also this very distinct smell of life on Earth. And of course, it's not something that we notice every day, because it's always there, so it's just part of all the background. But suddenly when you don't have it, and then you come back to it, it becomes very, very strong. So I remember coming back from the Antarctic, the plane would touch down, and in the Antarctic it's this cold, austere environment with no natural things growing outside. So when you land again in New Zealand, there's this really powerful smell. And it's just the smell of life. I think it's like the smell of the humidity in the air and all forms of life that are growing that you don't notice until you have it removed, and then it lasts only for a few minutes, so you really have to appreciate it. Like, somebody will point it out to you, because then it's gone, and it's just full in the background again, and you don't notice it anymore. I had that experience coming back from the Antarctic, like I mentioned, also when I did a caving expedition with the European Space Agency in Italy. The same kind of thing. You didn't have any of those smells in the cave, and you come out, you're overwhelmed by it. Your sense of smell is just overwhelmed by it, and it's so fleeting, and it's gone. And the same thing coming back from space, where you're suddenly back, you land, the capsule door opens, and it's this overwhelming smell, once again, of just life.
How about that? For all the excitement of going to space, it's oftentimes these things here on Earth that just give you such a feeling of nostalgia once you come back into it. And that smell of life that you're talking about, that is fascinating. There's really, as we know it right now, no place like Earth.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right?
That's right.
I'm thinking about the crew in there and what are they thinking about right now? And maybe they're taking some time to think about their family members and loved ones that are friends and family that are here today for the launch. And there's a lot of special people here today that I know for all of these crew members. I've been able to spend quite a bit of time with Anne's family, and she has a lot of friends here as well. The Axiom 4 crew, who will be joining them on the International Space Station hopefully during this mission, they were here for the first launch attempt, but unfortunately they had to go back to training. Peggy Whitson, the commander of that mission, is a close friend of Anne's, and all 4 of those crew members were here as well. Anne's high school friend Steve Gleason is here. If you're not familiar with that name, he was a safety for the New Orleans Saints, and then unfortunately came down with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, but has become quite a notable figure and on behalf of ALS and research and support for that disease. Vapor has an incredible presence here with all of her family and her volleyball team, and I love it. I remember this when Vapor was selected as an astronaut as well. Both Anne McClain and I were actually on the selection board for Nicole Vapor's class, and I remember her family being there to celebrate their announcement. They all had matching t-shirts, and they do again today, her volleyball team as well, so a lot of spirit that they're showing. Kirill, I mentioned he has his host family from when he was a high school student in Texas, as well as friends and family members here from Russia.
Dragon, SpaceX side hatch is closed, and we have begun the side hatch leak check.
Copy.
And Tak has a lot of friends from school and his previous jobs back in Japan, so everybody has an incredible representation of family and friends here to support them. And I bet the crew members are thinking about them a little bit. It's interesting. It's something we've talked a lot about as astronauts, that this launch day is the hardest for the loved ones, for those friends and family members. As crew members, we are so well trained in every little step along the way that we don't really have any surprises. We know what to expect, and we're pretty calm because you're just doing your job. You're doing what you're trained to do. But it's the family members that really this is the most difficult on, because they don't have that same level of training. They don't necessarily understand all the nuances, and it's their loved one sitting on the top of that rocket. So it's an interesting dichotomy, though, where I think the astronauts are quite calm, but they're probably more worried about their family members and how they're feeling than they are really about themselves right now.
And to draw the connection between you and Anne McClain, you two were in the same astronaut class, and that's how you became close friends.
Yeah, we were selected as part of the 8 Pauls class back in 2013. So 11 and a half years we've been astronauts together, and we have become incredibly close. So this is a very special launch for me to see Anne embark on this second mission, especially because it's just watching her exactly where she should be. Anne is one of those natural born leaders. She just has this aptitude and ability to relate to and lead people in such a powerful way. So seeing her today as the commander of this crew, knowing that her crew is in such good hands, it is a really wonderful thing to see.
Those leadership attributes come out even in the broadcast, as I've observed her just checking in on her teammates, seeing how they're doing. And when she answers questions in press conferences, she has a strong command of how to communicate, and she communicates really well, and that's a key to being a good leader, is to be able to have strong communication skills.
Yeah, she absolutely does. And when we talk about, you know, the crew maybe thinking about their family members, I bet Anne right now is thinking about her 3 other crew members and making sure that they are comfortable and safe and, you know, have everything that they need. I have seen her do that all throughout the training profile and throughout her time here at KSC leading up to launch as well. She's really taking care of that crew.
From inside the capsule to outside of it, there at the press site, see the countdown clock, a historic site. It's on the National Historic Register, in fact, with the flagpole blowing and the nice breeze going. Weather conditions for liftoff today, they're fabulous. There's your forecast. We are 95% go. Winds are coming 7 to 12 miles per hour out of the south-southwest. Temperature is a mild and comfy 70 degrees. The only concern for that 5% resides in the cumulus cloud rule, and that's because we have a little more moisture in the air than we did 2 days ago. But really, as you can see outside, not a lot of cumulus clouds. You've got those high stratus clouds, but there you see some off in the distance over top of the ocean, but those seem to be pretty thin. Not expecting a lot of moisture in those, so that all bodes well. There's a beautiful shot. The sky is open and clear for this liftoff right now. It's green, of course. We'll be looking again at the weather, as in fact even more closely as we get closer to launch.
Dragon SpaceX, ComCheck.
SpaceX Dragon, loud and clear.
Core, loud and clear. TDRS ComCheck complete. Stand by for ComChecks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Dragon, D on countdown 1, ComCheck.
DC Dragon, loud and clear.
DC loud and clear. Stand by for ComChecks with MD.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1, ComCheck.
MD Dragon, loud and clear.
MD loud and clear. Stand by for ComCheck over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground, ComCheck.
MD Dragon, loud and clear.
MD loud and clear. Stand by for ComChecks with LD. Dragon, LD on countdown 1, ComCheck.
LD Dragon has you loud and clear.
LD loud and clear. Stand by for ComCheck over Dragon to ground. Dragon, LD on Dragon to ground, ComCheck.
LD Dragon, loud and clear.
LD, loud and clear.
Dragon SpaceX, launch configuration, ComChecks complete.
All right, with the communication checks complete, that's a good milestone that we are passing now. Able to communicate with the crew both on the ground and through the air. We're now T-minus 2 hours and 9 minutes from launch. The ISS is an incredible orbiting lab and, of course, Crew-10's final destination. Here's a closer look now at how we're getting help here on Earth from all of that revolutionary science research being done up in low Earth orbit.
The International Space Station isn't just a symbol. It's a powerhouse of cutting-edge science, constantly revealing secrets that defy Earth's limitations and drive us farther into the cosmos.
Our mission is research and science. We have experiments mounted on the outside of the station that are looking at Earth. We study our own bodies and how they react to space, to weightlessness, to radiation, and that helps not only us go on further in future missions, but also helps for medical research back home. And then we study lots of different things as well, like materials, combustion, all sorts of things that help us understand life back on Earth.
Yeah!
Microgravity doesn't play by the rules. It flips them upside down, transforming how liquids flow, how flames burn, and unraveling biological mysteries before our eyes.
I saw some heart tissues beating in space, and it was incredible.
Photon, we see that top one beating. Looks like happy heart cells.
But we're not just along for the ride. We're explorers, diving headfirst into the challenge and harnessing the power of this unparalleled platform, just as we have been for decades. We're on a relentless quest for answers, seeking to understand the intricate workings of the human body in space and ensuring future crews stay safe on their daring journeys beyond Earth's orbit.
The human aspect of human space exploration is always going to be very important for decades to come.
And when it comes to technology, we're not waiting around. We're discovering new ways to grow crops in harsh environments and engineering innovations to tackle Earth's greatest challenges.
We have amazing technology that allows us to recycle water and create water for us to drink. It's delicious.
Microgravity isn't just a curiosity, it's a game changer in the fight against diseases back on Earth, paving the way for breakthroughs that benefit us all and enabling new economic opportunities in space.
Welcome, Axiom 3 on board the International Space Station.
From our vantage point more than 200 miles above Earth, we are not just spectators. We're gaining unprecedented insights into the world we call home, and we're sharing our findings openly. We're not just achieving results today. We're sparking inspiration in future generations of explorers and embracing the power of global collaboration as we reach for the stars.
What was your favorite experiment on the International Space Station?
Toby, great question. My favorite experiment was the one that I got to eat. It was us growing hatch chili peppers in our plant habitat.
Station Huntsville on 2, we have video in Node 1. Look at those chili peppers.
And as we soar through space at 17,500 miles per hour, each moment is a step closer to unlocking the mysteries of our Earth, our universe, and propelling our pioneering spirit even farther into space. So come along for the ride aboard the International Space Station.
Seeing that video brings a lot of fond memories of my mission. We didn't grow peppers, but we actually grew Mizuna lettuce during my mission, and that was something that I very much enjoyed because you had something green and growing that you were taking care of. You were giving it water every day and monitoring the growth. And then the best part was at the end of the experiment, we processed the lettuce, and some of it, of course, had to go back down for science, but then we were able to enjoy a fresh salad. So that was a big moment for me. And we have so much incredible science going on the International Space Station during all increments. And there are some specific experiments I can highlight today for what this crew specifically will be doing. There are kind of two areas. We're actually gotten into the time now where we even do some science on board the Dragon before the crew docks to the International Space Station. Some of those experiments that they'll be doing in Dragon, they have an experiment called Space Health, which is a Canadian Space Agency experiment. It's a biomonitoring wearable technology garment, and it's looking primarily at things like the cardiovascular system in terms of understanding more about how that system responds to microgravity to make sure that we can monitor these aspects of astronauts and keep them safe on orbit. There's an experiment called Thigh Cuff that they'll be doing in Dragon as well, and this is really a small kind of restraint that they put around their thighs, and this can help prevent and counteract some of the fluid shift that we experience in microgravity. So in microgravity, we have this upward fluid shift of our blood volume where it really leaves our legs, because here on Earth, gravity is pulling, of course, all that blood down to your feet. So in space, you have this upward fluid shift where the blood goes upward into the torso area and in the face. Sometimes you can see that in some of the astronauts, especially as they start adjusting to the microgravity environment. And some of these fluid shifts may be actually contributing to some of the problems that astronauts are experiencing in space. There's one example, the spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome, and this has some different hallmark features, but basically it is causing some vision deficits in some astronauts when they come back, and actually changes to the anatomy of the eye, the back of the eye, the retina, and the choroid layer, which is the blood supply for the retina. Some astronauts have an optic disc edema, so a swelling of the optic disc, and also even a flattening of the eyeball. So a flattening of the back of the eyeball actually changes the refraction and changes your vision. This was something that I actually experienced during my mission. I had a pretty severe case of SANS. Luckily, everything is kind of back to normal now, but the one lasting symptom that I have is that I have perfect vision now. When I launched to space, I actually did wear glasses and contacts, and because of that globe flattening, I now have 2015 vision that has persisted for the last 5 years. So, most expensive corrective surgery I think possible. Thank you, taxpayers.
When you mentioned that on Wednesday, it really kind of surprised me that it fixed it. But then I thought about it, and for most people who know, I wear glasses. For people who also wear glasses or contacts, you can have an astigmatism, which is an irregular shaped eyeball. And I was wondering since then if that's what ends up happening. Does it then take that irregular shaped eyeball, which is more like a football, and kind of make it more into a basketball when you go to in terms of your case and getting
not
better?
Not necessarily. In terms of my case, it's not like it's causing an astigmatism, and I didn't have an
right.
astigmatism.
No, but I'm saying reversing it.
Yeah, well, I didn't have an astigmatism to begin with. That's
see.
Different than just being nearsighted or farsighted.
Okay.
So I'm not sure actually if we have any data on people that experience SANS that have an astigmatism. That's an interesting question on how it would affect that overall shape. This is kind of just a flattening of the back of the eyeball that's normally round, so it changes that refraction, which of course changes, your prescription and changes your vision there. This crew on board Dragon will also participate in an experiment called immunity assay, and this is a new way to monitor health and immune function with a blood sample. So most of the time, historically in space, we take blood samples and we have to send them back down on Earth to be studied by scientists to evaluate them for all these different parameters, for example, immune system parameters. This is actually an in-flight assay that would allow the data to be collected in flight without going back down to the ground. So could be really important in terms of physiology and medical research, and also direct health of the astronauts as well.
Yeah, because when the blood comes back down to Earth, instantly gravity is then a factor. So studying it in that microgravity environment while it's up there,
yeah,
right?
The blood sample itself, the parameters that they're looking at, they won't be changing anymore because it's not in the human body anymore. But you're right, now we are keeping the experiment a little bit more clean, since we're never exposing anything back to that 1G environment. When the crew is on the space station, a few of the experiments they'll be participating in, one is the CIPHER study, which is a really large, comprehensive physiological study that has been kicked off in recent years here at NASA, and it's really a multidisciplinary study looking at both physiology and psychological components, and it's comparing different duration missions as well, and will be really important for that comprehensive physiology. For example, applications to SANS, like we talked about. There's an experiment called Drain Brain 2.0 that's really looking at blood flow between the heart and the brain in space and how that changes with microgravity. It involves a special neck collar that the astronauts will wear. And there are some particular flammability experiments, combustion experiments, one called Sophie Mist that the astronauts will be participating in. This is something that we do quite frequently, combustion experiments in space, because if you think about it, of course, even flames burn differently when we don't have this natural air motion and convection caused by gravity. This particular experiment is looking at different models for flammability that can be used on future space missions, and has terrestrial applications for combustion models as well. So lots of different types of science, really engaging and really important, not just for the future of astronauts and future space exploration, but direct applications to disease states and other factors back down here on Earth.
The burning stuff in space sounds like fun.
It is fun. Don't worry. It's very well contained.
Oh, you're just not taking a match.
Yeah, definitely. We have a special facility where it's a very contained environment in a glove box where we do these types of experiments, so we can make sure that we keep the astronauts in the space station safe.
Well, that's important. We are at T-minus 1 hour and 59 minutes and counting from liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and Endurance Dragon spacecraft from Launchpad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. Crew-10, as you can see here, currently inside Dragon. So far, Crew-10 has completed their comm checks to make sure they can communicate with the teams here on the ground. Their seats have rotated from their upright to their reclined launch position, which allows them to see and access their display panels. They have also completed their suit leak checks to make sure that their spacesuits are working properly. We also heard verification that we have a good side hatch leak check, so that's good. If you've been watching us since we came on the air at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, you know that we've had fantastic commentary from NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. My name's Daryl Nail. I get the pleasure and the honor to sit next to her and help document this journey to the launch pad with all of you. Let's go over the crew so you have a sense of a little bit about the folks who are inside the capsule today. We'll start with our crew commander, Ann McClain. This NASA astronaut is a West Point graduate and U.S. Army colonel who has spent 204 days in space and completed 2 spacewalks. She's a highly decorated Master Army aviator with over 2,000 flight hours.
Post-ingress briefing.
SpaceX Dragon, go ahead.
Good news. At this time, we are tracking no issues with Dragon or Falcon proceeding with launch today at this time. So I have no updates for you, but we'll continue to keep you up to date if anything happens. Otherwise, the closeout team is performing their final steps in the White Room before they depart the pad. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon, copy, no issues. Great work to the team.
That's a great update. Working no major issues. The launch vehicle, the spacecraft, the ground systems, all good as we watch the closeout crew continue to do their work before leaving the launch complex. And just to wrap up on Ann, she's a former rugby player and a pretty good one from what I hear. She got the nickname Animal.
Yeah, she is pretty tough. We talked earlier about her need for speed, and I think that leads into the story we told on Wednesday that I have to retell about how she has a particular inclination to operate vehicles in complex situations. And this one goes back to high school where she apparently ordered a pizza so large it could not be transported in the car. So she and her friend got in the car, they put the pizza on top of the car, and Anne, as the driver, natural commander seat of course, had her left arm up on top of the car to hold the edge of the pizza box and her right hand on the steering wheel, and her friend had her right hand up on the other side from the passenger seat. So Anne is really ready for anything, I would say, in terms of transportation and complicated vehicle setups.
And where in the world is it that you can order a pizza that's as big as the roof of a car?
Spokane, Washington, apparently.
Apparently so, right? Wow.
Colossal something, I guess they were called.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing it didn't come off the roof because it sounds like it would cover an entire windshield. So good job, Ann. Hey, let's talk about our Crew-10 pilot now, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. She's a U.S. Air Force major and graduate of the Air Force Academy. Nicole has flown the T-38 and the F-22 Raptor, logging over 1,400 flight hours, including 200 in combat. This will be her first space flight, making history as the first astronaut from NASA's 2021 class to fly. And she has said that that is very special to her. She feels humbled by it, and she's flying stuff up into space for her fellow classmates in honor of her being able to go first.
You know where she got her call sign, Vapor?
I do not.
It's an interesting story as well. You know, she's an F-22 pilot, and apparently is one of her early flights, and I think she had a formation flight with her colonel or something as her on-wing, so big deal flight. She got ready to start the aircraft, and suddenly as she was doing so, there was some kind of smoke building in the cockpit. So her training kicked in, and she was abort, 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 quick, you know, ready to leap into action and abort that engine start. And turns out it was just condensation. So that's how she became known as Vapor.
The vapor that condensated onto her glass inside the cockpit. Well, It's as good a nickname as any. I thought you were going to say that she pulls really hard G's and creates a vapor trail, and that's where I thought you were going.
Well, that
with
too.
Oh, that works as well.
She is a jet pilot.
Yes, she is indeed. Let's move on to our mission specialist now, Takuya Onishi. He's our JAXA astronaut on board. He's returning to space for his second mission. A former commercial pilot, he spent 113 days aboard the space station in 2016 and then became the first Japanese astronaut to capture the Cygnus spacecraft. When he's not training as an astronaut, he enjoys flying, hiking, movies, and playing the saxophone.
Also serving as a flight director. You know, he, after his second flight, got certified as a flight director and was actually acting as a flight director on the ground in the Mission Control Center in Japan for even up during his training flow until his last trip to Japan. So really exceptional experience for him, because it really gives you that kind of perspective that's so vital as an astronaut, to understand the ground really intimately. A lot of us as astronauts work as Capcoms in the Mission Control Center, talking to the astronauts from the Mission Control Center, and that affords that as well. But being a flight director is even more impressive. So well done for Tak for keeping that up. He even has an asteroid named after him.
Yeah, you mentioned that before, and I'm still very curious at how that came about.
We'll have to dig that one up.
Yeah, but you know, you mentioned his qualifications, which flows into his upcoming assignment as ISS Station Commander. Those are some great qualifications. The fact that he has seen it from both sides, both in space and on the ground. The second mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, a former airline co-pilot. This will be his first trip to the International Space Station, trained in skydiving, zero gravity, scuba diving, and wilderness survival. He's ready for the challenges of space. Not a man of very many words, but when he does speak, he's very succinct, very clear.
Kirill, we talked about the fact that he had never seen a bear until he went to California, even though he grew up in Siberia. But another great fact that I came across from his colleagues was that, you know, in this region in Siberia, it's very close to the Mongolian border, which is an incredible part of the world, where I actually had the opportunity to go to do some research to study bar-headed geese in Mongolia, and it is a very special area. But one of the things that's special about that area is that they do a lot of throat singing. It's this old traditional form of singing that's really deep and guttural from the back of the throat. I won't even try to do it because I can't, but if you've never heard it, you should definitely Google it and see. But apparently Kirill does throat sing.
He can do it?
He can. So I wonder if he's doing any of that for them in the capsule.
I've heard this, just so happened to have heard it, and I was fascinated by the sound that they make with their throat in this singing. It's really pretty cool. At first I was like, oh, whoa. But there was a very popular commercial on TV in which they had some of that throat singing, and that's where I first heard it, so I had to go look it up.
It is very cool.
That is pretty cool, yeah. We are T-minus 1 hour and 49 minutes until the liftoff of NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission. We have 3 astronauts and 1 cosmonaut inside of Dragon Endurance atop a Falcon 9 rocket. They're at Launch Pad 39A. They are headed to the International Space Station to help maintain the orbiting lab. Once on board the International Space Station, Crew-10 will become members very briefly of Expedition 72 for a few days. And there you see the members they'll be joining, Crew-9. And then they will become part of Expedition 73. They will conduct research to understand material flammability, contributing to the future spacecraft design, and study how spaceflight affects human physiology and psychology. And that's their patch.
Yeah,
The
this
crew
is an interesting one, Daryl. The Expedition 73 patch was designed to honor the science and scientists that make space exploration possible. And if you look at some of the elements on the patch here, the number 73 is a prime number and a binary palindrome. There's a good one for Pi Day for
How
all the
about
NASA
that?
geeks watching today. And that's represented at the base of the patch. 73 is also a star number, represented by the hexagonal shape of the patch, accented by white stars, and symbolize the crew's dedication to space exploration. The grid lines illustrate our earthly perspective from the cosmos, and finally the ISS, the International Space Station, symbolizing humanity's continued collaboration across space and time.
Those grid lines to me look like something out of an 80s video game.
Yeah, or the Matrix. You know, I believe Johnny Kim was the mastermind behind this mission. I believe we talked about it on Wednesday, but the way that we start a new expedition on board the International Space Station, it actually rotates not with the Dragon flights, but with the Soyuz flights. So Expedition 73 will begin on April 8th with the launch of that Soyuz mission. Sergei Ryzhikov, Alexei Zubritsky, and NASA astronaut Johnny Kim for his first flight.
Well, we have a moment. Let's take another social question. Laura, let's see. Landon Davidson asks, how long does it take to readjust to gravity on Earth once you return?
Well, Landon, like all things physiology related, there is a bit of individual variation, so different humans experience it a little bit differently. For me, it was interesting when I went to space, I actually adjusted very quickly. Even though, as humans we've never evolved without gravity, I felt really comfortable and like I was at home. Some astronauts do experience space motion sickness, though, for those first few days, where they may feel a little bit queasy, even a little bit nauseous, maybe even vomiting a little bit. But that's normal and usually resolves in the first few days. And most of these effects are really due to your neurovestibular system. So your inner ear, we have these semicircular canals, and some other organs that are actually gravity dependent in terms of how they work for your neurovestibular system, which is of course responsible for spatial awareness and balance and those types of things. So that system goes a little bit haywire when you first experience microgravity, and then once again after you've adapted to that and you come back down to Earth. So when you come back down to Earth, you don't feel great. You literally feel gravity, kind of like the bully on the playground that has their hand on your head and is pushing you down. You feel the weight of gravity when you're sitting down, like you just feel heavy. You go to get up from sitting on the couch. I remember having some lower back pain that actually persisted for many months. I just felt really stiff, like I was suddenly 80 or 90 years old and I couldn't, quite straighten out my back. But overall, astronauts generally adjust pretty quickly. In those first few minutes and even hours, you're a little bit like a drunken sailor when that neurovestibular system is really kind of readjusting. Some people have a little bit of motion sickness in those first few days. I didn't really have that. I was pretty fortunate. And then, you readapt to things like walking kind of quickly because your body just, gets used to it. You'd been doing it for so many years before flight. It takes a little bit longer to adapt to running because it's this more complex motor neuron connection for running than it is walking. And I remember that very well. I was in the gym with my trainer, and she's like, okay, go ahead, run across the gym. And it felt so strange as I took kind of that upstroke of one foot. It felt normal, but then when I landed my foot, I felt like I was an elephant crashing down to the ground.
Wow.
And we run in space on the treadmill every day, every other day, and so you're used to running, but you're not really used to running at your full body weight because in weightlessness we have a harness that we use to hold us down on the treadmill, but we usually only run at about 75% of our body weight. And of course it's so different when you're not under the full effect of gravity. So running takes a lot longer to kind of get normal again. So depending on what exactly you're talking about, the first days, even weeks, you feel pretty tired, but then you adapt fairly quickly after that, and maybe some lingering effects for some people, back pain and that kind of thing, but really a lot of individual variation there.
And you touched on it. It's not like you're not working out on station. Your exercise is part of your daily regimen, and you're staying as fit as you possibly can. So it's really interesting that when you come back down, that neurovestibular system That's the thing that's not used to it and is throwing everything off.
Yeah, because your cardiovascular system, you are running and bicycling every day pretty much up there to maintain your cardiovascular system. But of course, the rest of the time, your cardiovascular system is not acting against the force of gravity like it is here on the ground all the time. So there's some level of deconditioning that just happens where, on the space station, I'm up there, I loved running on the treadmill. You kind of feel like a gazelle since you're a little bit offloaded.
I feel fast.
And yeah, even your gait changes, your stride changes a little bit because of the mechanics of running are just different up there when you're not under your full body weight and you're kind of, you're being held down by this harness. But I really, really enjoyed it. But you're running for miles, every day. So Suni Williams did and a few other people have actually done marathons.
Dragon SpaceX closeout team has departed the crew arm.
SpaceX Dragon copies.
So what happens is when you come back down to Earth, you just even though you've been running miles a day, you come back to Earth and you can't even run a mile because you've had this kind of cardiovascular deconditioning. So that takes a little bit longer to come back.
Interesting, from a marathon to struggling with a mile just because of the change in coming back from space to Earth. Well, we are now T-minus 1 hour and 42 minutes and counting. Let's take you now inside Mission Control in Houston, where flight controllers are constantly monitoring the International Space Station and the people living on board. NASA's Gary Jordan is there. Good afternoon, Gary.
Good afternoon, Daryl and Jessica. Thank you. This is Mission Control Houston, and we're in the International Space Station's flight control room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The team continues to prepare for launch, led by Flight Director T.J. Creamer. Today we'll be, of course, launching the 10th rotational crew mission to the International Space Station under the agency's Commercial Crew Program. Following Crew-10's arrival, the space station will have a total of 11 crew members aboard for just a few days. 4 of those 11 crew members include the Crew-9 cadre, with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Butch Wilmore, and Suni Williams, alongside Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. During the next few days, Crew-10 will go over handover procedures with the off-going Crew-9, including a safety briefing and orientation. Then the new crew will jump right in to help advance scientific knowledge and demonstrate new technologies. After a few days of handover activities, the members of Crew-9 will prepare for their undocking and return to Earth. Direct handovers between crews allow for continuity of the activities and helps to ensure a continuous U.S. presence on the space station, which is now at 24 years and counting. Ahead of Crew-9's return, NASA astronaut Suni Williams turned over command of the space station to Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin. In just a few weeks, NASA astronaut Johnny Kim and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Ryzhikov and Alexei Zubritsky will join the on-orbit crew. Shortly after the departure of the Soyuz MS-26, with NASA astronaut Don Pettit coming home, will mark the commencement of Expedition 73, led by the new commander, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. All of this, of course, coming up after today's launch. We continue with the countdown, and with under 2 hours before launch, we'll send it back to Kennedy. Daryl?
If you just join us, this is live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. We're now T-minus 1 hour and 40 minutes until liftoff, and so far we've had a smooth countdown. No issues with the rocket or spacecraft, and ground systems are looking good for launch. You're looking now at the crew inside their capsule, Crew-10. And one of the first tasks Crew-10 did as a team was design and create their mission patch. There it is on your screen. And here's their description. The SpaceX Crew-10 patch was thoughtfully designed by the 4-person crew. They used AI for the initial inspiration, and then a human artist perfected the design. So as you can see, as you're looking at there, it's a 10-sided patch with the Roman numeral X boldly in the center, representing the ascent and descent that they will do. It's also representing the 10th operational flight of the Dragon spacecraft. Notice the Dragon with its wings fully out in full flight, that's a nod to the 4 crew members who are all professional pilots. The stars are red, white, and blue for the flag colors of each crew member's home country, and the brightest stars represent the crew's closest family members and support system. It's a lovely patch. And it was interesting, Nicole Ayers was asked about it. She said she kicked off the design of the patch when she and her husband initially used the AI image generator to come up with some ideas, but it was really just to kind of kick off some ideas, and she took those then to the human artist, who then was able to artfully design that Crew-10 patch. And I really like that X in the middle and how it's got them ascending into space and then returning to space. It's a good one, and you can see it there represented on the flagpole just below the American flag. Flies the Crew-10 patch on the CCP flag. CCP standing for Commercial Crew Program.
Yeah, it's one of the great things that we do together as a crew. Another one of those traditions like we talked about. You know, I don't know that everybody knows that we really do design those patches by ourselves. So we try to capture the elements that are important to us, special things from our professional and or personal lives, special things about the mission and timing, and just things that mean a lot to all of us as crew members. Oftentimes, you know, we are capturing the international spirit of cooperation and collaboration that's reflected by the makeup of our crew. We talked already about that 50th anniversary of the Apollo-Soyuz mission as well. All of these things really play into our patch design and thinking about what components to put there.
Will you have some artistic influence in your patch if you do a patch one day?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, I did help design the patches for my previous mission and for future missions as well.
Crew-10 is also allowed to have some personal items, as you well know, Jessica Meir, astronaut with NASA, joined us here on the broadcast. They get to take them with them for their stay, their extended stay in space. And for this crew, here's a few things that they will be taking up. And McClain, her and her crew were able to pack some personal gear to meet them on the ISS. It's going up on SpaceX 32 in April. She packed some sports team shirts, and those are from the schools she attended, along with some holiday gifts for the crew. Commander McClain said, most importantly, she was able to pack a memento for multiple people who worked on this flight to support her either personally or the mission as a whole. Those items will be returned to their owners after flight, and they include things like pins, necklaces, and rings. It's neat to have some jewelry that's flown in space. Takuya Onishi, he's having a lot of pictures of his family, friends, and colleagues sent up. He's also flying some banners from elementary schools he participated in when he was a small kid.
Yeah, it's always fun to bring a few of those personal affects from home. You know, one of the things as astronauts that's so important to us is being able to share this mission. You know, and this is not just for us as individuals or even just for us as a crew. This is really a mission for everybody. Everybody at NASA and all of our partner agencies, all of the people of our countries, really all of the citizens of the world. So we try to bring up things to represent that, whether they're from, you know, universities that we attended, different organizations we belong to, things that really represent all of the different people who helped us get where we were and where we currently are on the International Space Station, and to really bring it back to them, to tie it to them as well, to share the mission and remind everyone that this is truly for them and for all of humanity.
And just add a note about Nicole. She said she's taking items from alma maters and the Air Force volleyball team, which you mentioned. Some of them are here today.
Yeah, they are.
She's also taken a bunch of pictures of her friends and family so she can keep them close. And since she's the first person from her astronaut class to go to space, she's also taking up something for her classmates, the Flies, of course, Group 23. But she didn't want to say what it was. She wants it to be a surprise. But she said that she's getting nothing but love and support from her classmates.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that they are all so proud of her today. So excited for her. I never forget that first moment when you see your first classmate launch. It really does feel different. You know, you get to know all of the other astronauts and cosmonauts that are flying, and every launch, of course, is very special when it's one of your friends or colleagues. But it's a little bit different when you see your own classmate, because it just makes it more real for you. You know, your classmates are like your friends and family, and they started at the same time as you, and it just gives this extra dose of reality of, you know, wow, I didn't just become an astronaut. We actually are going to have the chance to go to space now. So, very exciting day, I know, for all of the Flies.
And a relaxing one for Kirill Peskov, who's on the left side of your screen, who looks to be taking advantage of some relaxing time before liftoff.
Absolutely. Maybe he's getting ready for some throat singing. You know, maybe this is part of the process.
He just heard me. He woke up. Yeah. He's got to let me clear my throat. Well, as Crew-10 launches, that means that Crew-9 will return home soon. Crew-9 launched from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station back on September 28th, 2024. And that was a unique flight because it was only 2 crew members in order to make room for Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, who, of course, flew up on a Boeing Starliner test flight, but are now coming down in those 2 open seats with Crew-9. That capsule is on station right now. Wilmore and Williams have been living and working on the space station now for over 9 months, the other 2 for a little over 5 months. Once Crew-10 arrives, there will be what's called a direct handover for 4 days, which is going to be shorter than usual. And then, of course, Crew-9 will undock and come back home. And so that's going to be a quick handover period that they're going to have, a little different than the longer week or so that they have.
Yeah, it depends on what's going on, you know, with comings and goings of different spacecraft. So those handover periods can be variable, also because, you know, we never know exactly when the Dragon's going to leave because we have to have good weather prediction for landing. So you never know exactly how long they'll be, but we do have to plan for something. This one is called a 2+2 handover. So we'll have 2 days of dedicated handover activities where the crew members that are up there, the experienced crew members, will be handing over all the important information, how they do things. You know, of course, this new crew is well trained on all the systems and everything up there, but there is just something to understanding exactly the lay of the land when you see it in person. Little nuances that you can really only get from the crew members that are up there, you can't necessarily get from the ground teams. So we take that time to really hand over all of that really important information. That will be, you know, especially for the new astronauts that have never been on board, but even for Anne and Tak, who are experienced and have been on ISS before, things have changed. It's been years since their mission, so there's different hardware on board, different systems. Some things are running a little bit differently, so really important time. The other component of 2 from that 2+2 is 1 arrival day and then 1 departure day. We will be extremely happy to have Suni and Butch back down here on Earth. They've been up there for longer than expected, but they were up there in space doing their mission, doing what we do as astronauts, the moment we all wait for as astronauts. So they've had a very productive mission. I love that we saw that image of Suni running on the treadmill. We talked about how she ran a marathon in a previous missions. I'm not sure if she did it again on this one or not, but I'll have to ask her about that. It'll be great to have them back, and they are coming back with another one of my 8-ball classmates, Nick Hague. So.
Indeed. Yep. And a lot has been made about the return of Suni and Butch, as we know, in the media and the reporting that's been happening about that. What's your sense of it inside the astronaut office that so much attention has been given to their return?
Yeah, definitely a lot of attention. But as I was saying, they are up there doing what astronauts are supposed to do. That is what we live for, and that's really our main intent of being astronauts, is to go to space and to do science and to do maintenance and do all the work that you do on the International Space Station. So it's really no big deal that Butch and Suni are up there, again, longer than expected, but they're contributing to all the science and all the maintenance on board, just like every other crew member. And it's just something as astronauts that we know we always have to be ready for. We always have to be flexible. You know that there's a plan for your mission. That plan can always change. as you've seen in recent years, there are so many different things that can happen, not just with vehicles, but all different aspects of the space station program. And so, we accept the mission, knowing what the plan is, but knowing full well that there's a very good chance that it can change. And that's just something that, a lot of us are used to from our previous careers as well, that flexibility and adaptability. And I think it's one of our most important skills as an astronaut. And that's what Suni and Butch have been doing.
You're absolutely right. They went up on a test flight that was supposed to last 8 days, but they were ready to become part of the team up at the International Space Station, working, maintaining. They did spacewalks. They have done it all.
Yeah, they're both very experienced astronauts. They've done International Space Station missions before, so it's not something foreign to them, and they were incredibly productive during their time.
All right, quick social question. We want to get another one up. We had a question come in from Swamp Smoke, who asks, what's one thing about living in space that no amount of training on Earth can fully prepare you for?
Yeah, that one, we get asked that one quite a lot. And, what I usually answer, I think, is true. We have so much extensive training that we've talked about today. We know all of these things. We have all this muscle memory for the spacesuit and all the things that we do up there. But what nothing can train you for is how it feels to live and work in microgravity all the time. Just the simple things, like the fact that you can't put your drink down on the table. You can't put your pen down. We've got Velcro on everything. And it's this really, if you see the photos and video of the International Space Station, there's stuff everywhere, on all the walls, on the ceiling, on the floor, cables everywhere. So if you take your drink bag and you Velcro it to a wall because you're up on the ceiling working for one moment, and then you go to a different location, you're on the floor or one of the walls, suddenly you're like, wait a minute, where did I put that drink bag? Because everything blends in this three-dimensional space, and your brain just isn't used to that. Here on Earth, look at us right now. Everything that we're using or looking at is really right down on this desk. We just put everything down, it stays there. We are not using any of this three-dimensional space above our heads or behind us or on the walls. And in space, you utilize all of that. And so it takes your brain some time to really adapt to that, to understand. You lose things a lot in the beginning because you put your drink bag down, you don't know where it went because you've been in all these different orientations and positions, and it's really hard to make those connections on spatial awareness. So I think that's the thing that's really difficult. Nothing can train you for it. You can talk to other astronauts and they can give you tips for dealing with some of these things, but until you experience it yourself, you really can't prepare for it.
I lose a lot of stuff on the ground. I can only imagine what I would lose in space. Thank goodness that my wife helps me track it down, along with these little Bluetooth reminders of where my keys and my wallet are. All right, T-minus 1 hour and 26 minutes and counting. Crew-10 getting ready for their mission to the International Space Station, and there you see them from left to right. We have Roscosmos cosmonaut and mission specialist Kirill Peskov. To his left, our right, the pilot, Nicole Ayers. To her left, going to the right, is the commander, McClain. And then to the far right on the screen, mission specialist and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. Up next, we'll be looking for the Launch Escape System Health Check. It's been a beautiful day so far here on the Space Coast ahead of liftoff. Currently at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 48 seconds for those who like to know the detail. Our journey today began at astronaut crew quarters at T-minus 4 hours when the astronauts began suiting up after a good weather brief, some breakfast, and health checks. They got into their vehicles and traveled out to the pad. It took about 20 minutes. They ascended the launch tower and then crossed that crew access arm that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. That took them into the white room at the very end of the arm, and they ingressed into the spacecraft where they are now. Got less than 90 minutes until liftoff. They performed this routine exactly as they did today on Wednesday during the first launch attempt. We got down to T-minus 43 minutes until we had an issue with some ground equipment and the hydraulics, where there was a trapped pocket of air inside the system. That was fixed and bled out on Thursday, and now the ground support equipment is good to go. The launch vehicle is go, and so is the spacecraft. More recently, the umbilicals, you can see those attached. They're across the back of the rocket, actually, and into the transporter erector. They provided some comm checks through those. We did some suit leak checks for the astronauts inside the capsule. We also did some comm checks, completed those. And the closeout team closed and sealed the hatch right after they got a leak check of its own inside the capsule to make sure that nothing would leak out. There you see it there. And that side leak hatch check is good. Side hatch leak check, rather. Also a final check for FOD, which is foreign object debris. The closeout team carefully examined the area around the seal for the side hatch, and they have since left. They cleared out of the blast danger area, and now the only 4 people who remain inside the perimeter of Launch Complex 39A are right there on your screen. The crew for Crew-10. This Dragon Endurance spacecraft is a special one for NASA. It's also special to Jessica, as you noted so well, and talking about the name of Endurance, and a historic ship that helped Shackleton cross the Antarctic. The Dragon spacecraft Endurance will take Crew-10 to space today in its 4th space flight. Since its first flight in 2021 for Crew-3, SpaceX's Endurance Dragon has been a workhorse for NASA's Commercial Crew program, flying mission after mission. It has safely carried astronauts to the International Space Station. With Crew-7, Endurance proved its reliability yet again, marking its 3rd journey to orbit. In all, Endurance has flown 10 astronauts and 2 cosmonauts to and from the International Space Station. And it's supported international crews from NASA, ESA, JAXA, and Roscosmos. Live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10 launch to the International Space Station. We are T-minus 1 hour and 17 minutes and counting until liftoff of Crew-10 on a Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station. Crew-10 will be the latest crew to fly as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, which uses private companies to transport people to and from the orbiting lab from right here on U.S. soil. We've had a great countdown so far. What a beautiful shot. The Indian River Lagoon in the foreground. In the background, the Falcon 9 rocket and Endurance spacecraft with Crew-10 on board. Weather is 95% go. The only tiny concern is the formation of cumulus clouds, but as you can see from this view, we don't have many of those around here, and that's a good thing. Excitement is starting to pick up as we get closer and closer to liftoff, and Jessica, it's been a good day so far.
Yeah, absolutely. The weather looks perfect, and much to Vapor and other Air Force jet pilots' delight, no need for umbrellas today.
That's right.
Crew getting comfortable. Getting closer and closer. They're getting excited. You know, Daryl, it's been 5 years since the Demo 2 mission, which was the first crewed mission of SpaceX, and that was an interesting timing. That was actually just after I left the ISS. I left in April of 2020, and Demo 2 occurred in May, and since then, we've had 11 crewed flights. This will be the 11th crewed flight. So this will be the 10th rotational flight for crew members after that Demo 2 flight. So pretty impressive that all of that has happened in that 5-year period. And another fun fact, the Demo 1 mission, which was of course the mission without a crew for that very first test of the Dragon and docking to the space station, that was when Anne McClain was on board for her first mission in 2019. So she played a very crucial role of getting in Dragon and doing all of those checkouts after that vehicle had docked to the space station. So pretty cool full circle story here of Anne being up there for that first uncrewed mission, and now in Crew-10, the 11th crewed mission in the last 5 years. So pretty impressive.
How about that? She saw the first Dragon come up, and now she's on board the 11th. And for you too, right there at the beginning, we're on our 10th operational mission, as you mentioned, and now when you look back, you think about just being right there at the beginning of the commercial crew program when that Dragon docked at the ISS. It was really exciting for, the entire country was so thrilled to have the ability to fly to space from American soil again.
Yeah, it was really wonderful to resume that aptitude to send rockets and with crew members on board from American soil again from here in Florida, and of course still trading off regularly with our Russian counterparts with Soyuz flights. So we're still continuing to fly American astronauts on the Soyuz, and as you see, we have a Russian cosmonaut on the Dragon today. So really nice that we maintain this spirit of international cooperation on board the International Space Station. Especially, as we said, with that 50th anniversary of Apollo-Soyuz coming up in July. Another spectacular view. I think it's going to be a very beautiful launch day for all the people on the ground here in Florida.
Absolutely, we are headed in that direction. And hopefully so with the weather, because the weather gets a little iffy once we get into the weekend. So this is a prime opportunity to go.
Just like that prime number 73 for Expedition 73.
That's right. Let's grab another quick social question, Jessica. We're with Jessica Meir, NASA astronaut. Mohammed Therick asks, apologies if I didn't get your name correctly, what lessons from the Crew-10 mission will influence future astronaut rescue and contingency planning for the ISS and beyond?
I think for that one, there isn't really
and
something...
Launch control on countdown for crew readiness. We'll be commencing with fuel bleed in approximately 2 minutes. Expect some pressing and venting from the vehicle.
And we can see the venting and that fuel bleed that's happening right now as it comes off the transporter erector. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit earlier about how whatever vehicle you launch on, that vehicle remains docked to the International Space Station as your lifeboat, essentially as your rescue vehicle. Even though you launch and you're not going to land for 6 months or more, you have that vehicle there at all times. In case anything happens on the space station, anything happens to a crew member, though we needed to get the crew home safely. So we always have that rescue capability. From time to time, as you've seen in the last few years, we do have various situations emerge. If there's a technical issue on a certain vehicle, for example. And so we do what we do best here at NASA, and that is adapt and reevaluate and replan. And to me, that has always been the most impressive thing of working at NASA. When I am most impressed about NASA, it's when we have these challenges, because you see NASA rise to the occasion and do what we do best. Readapt and be flexible, and that's the same thing for all of these rescue missions. We will replan and do whatever we need to do.
Good afternoon. You're watching live launch coverage of NASA and SpaceX's 10th rotational flight to the International Space Station. I'm NASA's Daryl Nail, and with us again today is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. It's great to have you back again.
Thanks, Daryl. It is wonderful to be here. Sending your friends and colleagues up to space is always the best thing that you can do as an astronaut here on the ground. So I'm so excited to be here playing a role in all of it.
And a big reason that you're here, to see your good friend Anne McClain off to space. Liftoff for her and the rest of the crew is at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time from here at Launchpad 39A. But before we continue our coverage, a quick reminder about Jessica's experience in space. Take a look back to 2019. Jessica Meir and Christina Cook made history with the first all-women spacewalk, the 221st for Space Station Assembly. 2 years later, Jessica served as astronaut support person for Crew-10, or Crew-2 rather. There you see her, number 38, helping the team all the way to the pad. Then she went over to pad 39B, where she rehearsed with the Artemis 2 crew. A great time with the astronauts was had, but this time, this crew was practicing to go to the moon.
You know, I really like this video because it shows the enthusiasm that we all bring to the roles, whether it's a support role or whether it's a crew itself. You know, there is nothing better than helping sending your friends off to space, as I just said. So one of the most interesting things about our job as astronauts is doing different things all the time. It is an incredible time to be an astronaut right now, where we have so many different vehicles we can launch on. The Soyuz, like I launched on, the SpaceX Dragon that you're watching here today. Soon, hopefully, coming up next year, the Artemis 2 vehicle will launch and send our first astronauts to an orbit around the moon. So it's a very exciting time for us.
We certainly have a lot to look forward here on the Space Coast and for the United States space program. Some background, though, on today's launch attempt. It is the second launch attempt for Crew-10. On Wednesday, NASA and SpaceX stood down from the first attempt after teams discovered a suspected pocket of air trapped in the ground support hydraulic system used for the clamp arm that you can see there on your screen. It is wrapped around the Falcon 9 rocket and holds it to the launch arm. Yesterday, ground support teams successfully flushed that hydraulic system, and now it is ready to go for today's launch. The crew had a little bit of break while they worked on that.
Yeah, they did. The crew was able to relax yesterday. I think it was a very fortuitous opportunity because, you know, the day before you launch, they're still probably doing all of these things that are giving them a little bit of stress, dealing with last-minute issues. And then yesterday, they had already done all those things for the previous launch. So they had yesterday to really relax and just a chance to be outside at the beach house and just take it all in, appreciate some of the sights and sounds and feels of the Earth before they go to their new home on the ISS.
Crew-10 will be launching from pad 39A that you see there. Big props to our flight operations crew right here at the Kennedy Space Center for those beautiful views. You see the helicopter on the left part of your screen orbiting around the pad, going in circles, and appropriately so, here on Pi Day. Once the crew, sorry?
I'm sure making Anne McClain feel right at home, too, the sweet sounds of the helicopter in the distance.
Absolutely. A helicopter pilot herself, and all of them pilots inside the capsule today. In a little over an hour, this spacecraft and rocket will lift off. So let's take you through the rest of their launch day previously leading up to this moment. After waking up and having a bite to eat, SpaceX helped Crew-10 into their suits, as you can see here inside the historic crew quarters suit-up room. They also played a card game, a tradition to use to get their bad luck out of there, losing for the commander and the chief winning. Then we saw them walk out. Crew-10 waving, taking the same footsteps as every NASA astronaut since Apollo 7 in 1968. Walking out, greeting the crowd, getting into their vehicles, and then joining a security escorted caravan for a 20-minute ride to Launchpad 39A. And then there they are, looking up and looking out as they walk down the crew access arm into their spacecraft on top of the rocket. And now they are locked and loaded inside the spacecraft. And we are watching them live while they await the next big milestones, the fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket and the arming of the launch escape system. Throughout this broadcast, we've been taking your questions from social media, so keep sending them. Hashtag AskNASA on NASA's YouTube, Facebook, X, and Twitch platforms. Also, for those of you watching on NASA's YouTube channel right now, a reminder to make sure you refresh your player or browser to join our live chat. Now, at this time, we are expanding our coverage and would like to welcome SpaceX and NASA commentators joining us live from Hawthorne, California, where the SpaceX mission team is located. And a great good afternoon and welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Daryl. I'm Jesse Anderson, a Senior Production Engineering Manager here at SpaceX.
And I'm Anna Schneider with NASA Communications. We are excited to be joining you once again from Mission Control here in Hawthorne as we count down to liftoff of Crew-10 just over an hour from now. Of course, Crew-10 is our 10th operational mission with SpaceX, flying astronauts for long-duration missions to the International Space Station. Crew-10 will have 2 first-time flyers on board, as well as a veteran NASA astronaut and a veteran Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, astronaut. And the multinational crew represents 3 different space agencies, with NASA, JAXA, and Roscosmos all represented.
Today's crew will fly aboard the Dragon spacecraft named Endurance, which previously flew the Crew-3, Crew-5, and Crew-7 missions. Overall, this will be Dragon's 46th visit to the space station and its 14th human spaceflight mission to the orbiting lab, which includes NASA's Commercial Crew Program missions and private astronaut missions with Axiom Space. We're also celebrating the 23rd anniversary of the founding of SpaceX today on March 14th, which also is Pi Day, a celebration of the mathematical constant pi.
Now, over the last 3+ hours, Crew-10 has been going through the detailed process of getting ready for their mission to the International Space Station. So let's go ahead and take a moment to introduce you to the crew. In the commander's seat is NASA astronaut Ann McClain. She's making her second trip to low Earth orbit. The Spokane, Washington native and U.S. Army colonel was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013 and has spent a total of 204 days in space, completing 2 spacewalks totaling 13 hours and 8 minutes outside of the orbiting laboratory. Next to McClain in the pilot seat is Nicole Ayers, who was selected as a NASA astronaut in 2021. The Colorado native graduated from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and is a major in the U.S. Air Force, and this will be the first spaceflight for Ayers. Serving as a mission specialist is JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and today's flight will mark Onishi's second trip to the space station. He was selected as an astronaut by JAXA in 2009 and has logged 113 days in space previously. To round it all out, the final mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, and he was selected as a cosmonaut in 2018 and will also be making his first spaceflight today. Once on board the International Space Station, Crew-10 will briefly become members of Expedition 72 and then Expedition 73 in April. They will conduct space station maintenance and scientific research to understand material flammability, contributing to future spacecraft design and study how spaceflight affects human physiology and psychology. The crew will also engage with students worldwide via ham radio and use its existing hardware with newly integrated software to test a backup lunar navigation solution.
To date, SpaceX has flown 56 crew members to space since the Demo 2 mission in May of 2020, which was almost 5 years ago. Coming up here at T-minus 45 minutes, we'll be listening in for the team to report their readiness for propellant load with a final go, no-go poll. And so far, today continues to be a smooth countdown, and we're looking good for an on-time liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 39A in Florida. Now here on the ground, the teams will be staffed around the clock in mission control just behind us to monitor Dragon and the mission, and not just for today, but throughout the entire mission, from liftoff to the Crew-10's arrival at the space station, all the way through splashdown when the astronauts return back home. And on console or headset in mission control, which you can see there on your screen, there are 6 key positions. The mission director is in charge of the room and tasked with making real-time decisions to ensure mission success. The person that you may hear talking to the astronauts is the crew operations and resources engineer. You'll hear us refer to them as the core throughout the broadcast. And there are 4 additional team members focused on vehicle systems, including avionics, navigation and control, software, propulsion, life support, and communication with ground support teams. Now, apart from mission control, our Falcon 9 team...
Dragon SpaceX, cycling orbit tank isolation valves to equalize low flow pressure. Additionally, I can give you a go to step into Section 5. When ready, report go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, copy Section 5 and work.
Just pausing for some comms between the core and Crew-10. Now, apart from Mission Control, our Falcon 9 team is currently located in the Launch and Landing Control Center at Hangar X. And we are now less than an hour until launch, and they are settling in for final checkouts, propellant loading, and getting ready for launch itself.
Yep, and NASA has its very own set of team members at NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, who have been preparing the International Space Station for Dragon's arrival. The teams in Mission Control Houston recently gave their go for launch, confirming that the station is ready to receive Dragon and the new crew. Following liftoff, today's flight to the space station will take about 28 hours, with Dragon flying autonomously the entire way. Docking is targeted for 11:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Pacific, tomorrow, March 15th. And just like autopilot on a commercial aircraft, the crew always has the ability to take manual control of the spacecraft if needed.
And before all of that happens, as the booster returns to the launch site and slows down from supersonic speeds, people in the immediate area may hear a brief double clap of a thunder-like sound known as a sonic boom.
Similar sonic booms like this were heard during the return and landing of the space shuttle, and sonic booms like these are one of the hallmarks of reusable systems like Falcon.
Here's what some of these booster returns have looked and sounded like on previous missions.
I know a lot of people will be excited when they hear the sonic boom.
And these are going to provide quite a show, because you're going to hear those sonic booms.
We are now at T-minus 57 minutes and counting to today's launch. While we wait, let's check in with NASA's Gary Jordan at Johnson Space Center to see how things are shaping up at Mission Control in Houston. Gary, how's it going?
Hey, Jesse. Hey, Anna. Thanks for having me. Welcome again to Mission Control here in the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We're the hub of human spaceflight at NASA, and the team here is poised for launch and preparing for the crew to lift off and begin their journey to the orbiting laboratory. In the home stretch of rendezvous, NASA and SpaceX flight controllers will enter into what's called integrated operations. Both flight control teams will conduct a series of go, no-go polls for Dragon Endurance's docking to the International Space Station. Rotation missions like Crew-10 help NASA continue to maximize the important research and technology demonstrations made possible only in the International Space Station's unique microgravity environment. The space station is critical for NASA to prepare for future commercial low Earth orbit destinations and to understand and overcome the challenges of long-duration spaceflight necessary for a long-term presence on the Moon and crewed missions deeper into the solar system, including Mars. Now here's a closer look at the mission and what Crew-10 will have to look forward to during their stay aboard the International Space Station.
The Crew-10 mission is going to be a rotational mission to the International Space Station.
So we will launch aboard the SpaceX Dragon capsule and the Falcon 9 rocket.
I'm just enjoying the way towards the launch. Of course, I'm looking forward for the day of launch.
And we are going to stay there about a half a year.
So the first goal of Crew-10 is to continue learning about the Dragon and the Falcon 9 rocket that we're going to be flying on to enable SpaceX to continue their development of rockets and even private astronaut missions in the future. The other mission is to get us safely to the International Space Station so that we can crew this incredible national orbiting laboratory that we have and continue the science experiments that we have ongoing there.
One of the unique characteristics of the International Space Station is microgravity.
We get to learn how humans and plants science and other types of hardware react in the space environment and the microgravity environment.
And it helps us to develop all kinds of new materials, medicines, and it helps us to push our knowledge forward.
The discoveries that we make on board the International Space Station then inform what we do on Earth, and it allows us to further both humankind here on Earth and get to further places in the universe.
So I've often been asked why we explore, and I think it's different for everybody.
When people are born, they naturally want to explore their environment, first as babies, and then as kids, and finally as adults. That's how we expand our world, and that's how we find something new.
Every time that we make a further step, we learn something and we learn how to adapt, and that is so important to humanity.
This is probably the main things which drives us forward and helps us to survive as a species.
There are so many unknowns in space, and as explorers and as humans, we want to find out what's in that unknown. For me, it's the fact that I get to be a small piece of figuring out what the unknown is and taking that next step to get to the moon and to Mars and the Artemis program.
Our ultimate goal is to go to Mars, but it's not an easy journey, and when we face a new challenge, we must solve it step by step.
I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the International Space Station. We're outside of the atmosphere, and now we don't have the protection of the atmosphere. What happens, and how do we better prepare our people, our hardware, our food, our water systems for that deep space exploration? It's really important on the space station that we learn those lessons now when we're in low Earth orbit. That way we know what we need to bring with us when we go onto the moon with the Artemis program.
One of the things that we do on the International Space Station is work with our international partners all across the world.
I think it's hard to overestimate the value of international cooperation in space exploration, because we all know that it takes much time and effort.
Space is hard, it's very challenging, it's sometimes unpredictable, and that's why I think cooperation is the key to success.
The International Space Station wouldn't be international without all of our partners.
And our goal is to be a beacon of hope for all of humankind, so that people can look and say, this is what we can accomplish when we work together.
T-minus 52 minutes and counting. We just pulled go for NASA and SpaceX to begin propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes. A great update there to our milestones. We now have NASA's Megan Cruz live from a nearby launch viewing location here at Kennedy Space Center. Megan.
Hey, yeah, back here again today, and the weather is as beautiful as it was Wednesday, and the crowd as excited as ever to see liftoff in less than an hour. Now, we again want to bring in Mike Ravenscroft with NASA's Commercial Crew program. He's on console working the launch today over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Mike, great to have you back.
Hi, Megan. Happy to be here.
All right, so again, thanks for stepping off console. When we spoke during Wednesday's launch attempt, there was a ground hydraulics issue. What was done to resolve that to get us to launch today?
Yeah, Megan. So the team worked really hard on Wednesday during that first attempt to resolve the issue. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get there. So the teams, the SpaceX and NASA team, met Wednesday evening, Wednesday night, and developed a troubleshooting plan to go ahead and restore this system back to operational. So we went ahead and met, and Thursday they went off and executed that plan. They went ahead and opened up some of the valves, did some inspections, opened up some of the valves, and went ahead and bled the system. And then they did perform checkouts and performed the checkouts, and the system was nominal at that point. So we got back here today on launch countdown, and did some additional checkouts, normal checkouts that are performed on day of launch, and everything's checking out good.
That's wonderful to hear, and it's always great to see teams coming together to resolve issues to get us to launch. Now, as CCP's Launch Vehicle Systems Office Manager, you were also part of keeping an eye on today's booster, correct, which is flying for its second time? Yeah,
Megan, so we watched that booster from the beginning when it's starting to be built, the whole way through production, the whole way through all the testing that's performed, even before it's getting that first launch, which occurred in December for the Empower-E mission. So we track all that, track all the issues that come out from all that in the first flight, and we review all that data. And then when it goes into maintenance for our flight, we are tracking all that work along with SpaceX and ensuring that the vehicle is ready for day of launch and a safe flight for the crew to the ISS.
And Mike, last question for you. You know, how do you feel just being a part of NASA's Commercial Crew program?
This is awesome. I can't imagine myself anywhere else. This program, I've been here for quite a while, and you know, this is a family. You get to work with folks from all over the country, from California to Texas to Alabama to here in Florida, and it's just a family, and that's how we feel about each other. We work hard. We get to work with a lot of great contractors, and so, you know, day in and day out, you get to show up for work and enjoy what you do.
Yeah, and do amazing things together. Mike, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Meg. Appreciate it.
All right, let's get back over now to Anna and Jesse in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Megan. Falcon 9 is the first orbital class rocket capable of reflight. Together, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy have completed more than 450 launches and over 380 reflights.
And today, the booster will be attempting to land at Landing Zone 1, which is just down the coast from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This will be the second flight of the first stage booster supporting the Crew-10 mission.
Rapid reusability drastically reduces launch costs, helps increase launch frequency, and enables a wide array of new government, commercial, and scientific opportunities in space. Lowering the cost of access to space is helping take humanity's next steps into the solar system, whether in low Earth orbit, interplanetary, or even deep space. And when costs are lowered, government and commercial customers can launch more missions, which helps accelerate development. This also helps commercial satellite and private research customers afford to launch more projects to space, which helps stimulate innovation here on Earth. All of this to say, reusability is the key innovation that is making space more accessible for the industry as a whole. And just like the first stage of Falcon 9, Dragon is also reusable.
The reusable Dragon spacecraft has flown people to the International Space Station 13 times. And as we mentioned earlier, today's crew will fly aboard the same Dragon that previously flew the Crew-3, Crew-5, and Crew-7 missions.
But back to today's mission. We are coming up on T-minus 48 minutes to launch, and our teams are carefully moving through the pre-flight process. Now, a lot of preparations have brought us to this point, including a dry dress rehearsal, static fire on Sunday, and an initial launch attempt on Wednesday. Now, we did stand down from that attempt due to a hydraulic system issue, but the teams completed inspections of the ground support hydraulic system used for the clamp arm supporting the Falcon 9 rocket and successfully flushed a suspected pocket of trapped air in the system.
Now, all of that hard work brings us to today's launch, and next up in our
the team has pulled go for LES arm, propellant load, and launch.
And there, you just heard that the team had pulled go for both prop load and for launch. So that was the next step in the countdown that we were waiting for, and that was from the SpaceX launch director, and they were calling up to the crew to let them know that we had received that go to continue with that prop load. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the Dragon launch team, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch and Landing Control Center at SpaceX's Hangar X in Florida. And the launch director will also check in with the Dragon mission director, referred to as the MD, and the NASA launch manager to make sure everyone is on the same page and everyone is ready to move forward. Again, there's a lot of teams and a lot of moving parts to getting a launch off the ground. And so leading up to the final stages of launch today, you will hear various check-ins on that process. So right now, there on your screen, you can see Crew-10. They are on board Dragon, waiting to get the green light to stow the crew arm for the launch and arm the launch escape system. And we did just hear that go, so we should start getting a good view of that access arm moving away from the spacecraft pretty soon. Now, on the range side of things, the range continues to be go for launch, monitoring the clearance area surrounding our launch pad, as well as the air and sea space along the flight corridor.
And as you can see in your on the left-hand corner of your screen, the weather is looking great for today's launch. Overall, weather is trending in the right direction, and we currently have less than a 5% chance of violation at our target liftoff time today, which is great. Our teams will continue to keep an eye on the weather, but we'll have a final pre-fueling weather briefing in about 20 seconds from now at the T-minus 45 minute mark. Now, weather is forecasted to be excellent on the Space Coast heading into today's launch opportunity. And again, the current forecast is greater than 95% chance of acceptable conditions at launch. Now, weather along the Atlantic
T-minus
coast.
45 minutes. Both control rooms go into lockdown and remain in that state until the launch escape system is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console and maintain a sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarming of the launch escape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and they'll approve boarding the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew for movement.
Crew access arm retraction starting.
And that was the launch director performing a briefing with the crew. Sounds like everything is go for launch, and we're going to start seeing that crew access arm moving away from the vehicle here shortly.
We should also see propellant load getting underway in just a few minutes as well. Again, our teams are staffed around the clock in Mission Control here in Hawthorne, Mission Control in Houston, as well as the Launch Control Center to monitor Dragon throughout its entire mission from liftoff all the way to Crew-10's arrival at the space station and then on its return home to Earth. And there you're seeing some great shots of the crew access arm pulling away from Dragon. Clear skies as far as the eye can see. Perfect weather for today's launch.
Getting exciting over here. Yeah, weather looks amazing over there at pad 39A. You can see that crew access arm still moving. It'll move all the way to that 90 degrees away from the vehicle.
Crew access arm retraction complete.
And there we just heard confirmation that the crew access arm has been fully retracted. That process is now complete. Again, the next step in our process leading up to today's launch at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific will be the propellant loading, and that should be getting underway here shortly. In the meantime, let's go ahead and check back in with Daryl at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. Back here with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir as we orbit the launch pad, Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center, going in circles on Pi Day. Seems fitting, Jessica.
Absolutely, it does. This is the day for it.
We've got a few milestones coming up here in the next few minutes. We're going to close our visors at T-minus 39 minutes and then start the process of getting that launch escape system armed. As we just saw, the crew access arm has moved away, so if there were to be an emergency, going through the crew access arm is one option up until the point in which the launch escape system is armed, and then it's off the top of the rocket.
Yeah, that's right. That launch escape arm could actually swing back in just about 30 seconds, and during that time, the crew would actually be unbuckling their seatbelts and getting ready to egress, so that timing would work out.
Visors closed, arming the launch escape system.
Copy, Dragon. You are go for 6.6 arm launch escape.
Running these milestones early at this point, which is a good thing. We heard Commander...
Launch escape system is verified armed.
There we have the verification that the launch escape system is armed, a high energy system that could be very much needed in case something were to happen to the rocket.
Yeah, that's something that the astronauts on board can actually hear. They can hear it being armed. They get this sort of loud thump that they hear. And of course, that launch escape system, it consists of 8 Super Draco thrusters. It's only used for an abort in this case. And it's armed 2 minutes before the loading of the fuel.
And I'm wondering about your thoughts in this moment as you hear Commander Ann McClain get these systems ready. Your friend, your fellow classmate, getting ready to go.
Yeah, I think things are getting very real right now. It's really interesting on launch day. You know, I know from my own experience, sometimes you actually have to remind yourself that it's actually launch day because you have been through this whole series of readiness and all of these checks and all the comm checks and all the physical actions so many times in various simulations. I remember on my launch, I really did have to remind myself, I'm looking at my monitor, I'm going through all of these different cues and the procedures, but then I would hear something, maybe the groan of the fuel in the lines or a slight movement of the rocket, and that was what made me realize, oh, wait a minute. At the end of this one, I'm not going to be going home and going to dinner. I will be in space. So perhaps that realization is kind of setting in for these 3 astronauts and cosmonaut. I'm sure it's a little bit different for Ann and Tak, who have gone through a launch before. Totally new for Nicole and Kirill. So a really nice blend of experience in that Dragon capsule today.
And a beautiful scene outside as we head towards sunset. We'll be lifting off just before then at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Sunset right around 7:30. It should make for a beautiful launch for those who are gathered in the area to watch. The sky will become lit up as the sun dances with the exhaust from the Falcon 9 rocket.
These launch escape systems that we're talking about are, of course, a vital component of any vehicle that contains astronauts on board. And it's something that we hope, of course, to never have to use. But the few times historically when we have had to use them also provide such a testament, such a great test of that system. I remember very well Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin's abort on the Soyuz that happened in 2018. I was in training at the time in Star City, and that abort happened when they were at about 30 miles up, and they ended up going up to about 50 miles and then landing safely due to the very reliable, highly functioning abort system. Search and rescue teams were there to pull them out in about 10 minutes. And a really stressful day, of course, for everybody.
And tanks venting for propellant load.
That was a stressful day for everybody on board and everybody on the ground, but again, a really nice test to see that these systems are in place for a reason and they do work.
Nick Hague went to space that day and came right back. And fortunately, everything went well, and he was able to return to the ISS, and he's up there now.
Yeah, he's up there right now waiting for this mission to join him. I know that he's very much looking forward to giving Ann and her crew a big high five, especially for those 8-ball classmates, but really for everybody on board. We joke in our class that, Nick launched 2.5 times so far for his 2 missions to space, but he's got a little bit of extra experience.
We have learned so much during your time here, Jessica, spending it with us, giving us your insight and talking about your experiences in space flight. We appreciate it deeply. Also, the audience appreciates it as they continue to ask questions on NASA's social media channels, #AskNASA. Propellant load for the Falcon 9 rocket. Falcon 9 rocket.
The launch auto sequence has started.
And here we go. Tanks are being filled. Prop load is underway. A very dynamic time for the astronauts and the ground crews. For this countdown today, we got a little further and have gone further than our attempt on Wednesday, which stopped at T-minus 43 minutes. We are now T-minus 34 minutes, and everything is looking good. The vehicle is go, spacecraft is go, ground teams are go, and now we are tanking this rocket.
So this crew is hearing those sounds. As we mentioned, they can hear the fuel flowing through the valves and flowing through the pipelines. And this is a rocket-grade kerosene called RP1 and also liquid oxygen. That is the fuel for this powerful Falcon 9 rocket today.
1.8 million pounds of thrust once the rocket takes off. Thanks to our Kennedy Space Center flight operations team for these beautiful helicopter shots. Doing a great job. Let's go back now to Hawthorne, California, and join our commentators there.
We are at T-minus 33 minutes from launch and getting closer and closer to launching Crew-10 into space. After the long-duration mission is complete, Crew-10 will be the first NASA commercial crew mission to target a return splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. NASA and SpaceX have been working together toward certification and readiness for Dragon recoveries on the West Coast. Since 2019, Dragon recoveries have primarily occurred off the coast of Florida. SpaceX is moving Dragon recovery operations to off the coast of California to allow Dragon to complete its deorbit before safely jettisoning the trunk over the Pacific Ocean, comparable to the first 21 Dragon missions. Crew splashdown locations are near Los Angeles, Oceanside, and San Diego. The recovery vessel Shannon will be stationed in Long Beach, California to support the new operations. And to establish this capability that improves public safety, NASA and SpaceX worked for months establishing new sites, obtaining regulatory approvals, performing engine assignments and software changes, as well as tabletop exercises and flight rule updates.
It'll be really exciting to see Crew-10 come home after they're done with their long-duration mission. But Crew-9, who Crew-10 will be handing over once they get docked to the space station, will, of course, still splash down off the coast of Florida in a few days. But back to today's mission, let's go ahead and learn more from the astronauts flying today.
You know, I often get asked why we explore. Some people explore because it's exciting to ride on a rocket. They like the boom, they like the flying, they like the electronics, they like to go fast. Some people want to explore to answer questions about the context in which the Earth exists. How old are we? How many galaxies are there? How big are we? Are we like a speck of dust on somebody's sleeve, or are we the biggest thing going out there in the universe?
Curiosity is like the main power that moves us forward. Space exploration is important to satisfy this curiosity.
As we go on to the moon and Mars and look at what those planetary bodies are made of, we can learn a lot about the Earth itself and how to better humankind.
I think it's important for us as a species to expand our boundaries, because that's how we advance our technologies and civilization.
We have to continue to explore, continue to push the boundaries.
And I think really throughout the history of humankind, we've always explored. And so when people ask why we explore, I would like to ask back, what type of society would we be if we lost that curiosity? Is that somewhere that we'd want to live?
Space Center in Florida, I'm Daryl Nail, joined by NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. So good to have you here. Here's more about the crew that's going into space today. I'm Daryl Nail with NASA. Welcome back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, here with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. Here's more about the crew that's going into space today. NASA astronaut Ann McClain, she is your Crew-10 commander, making her second trip to low Earth orbit. The Spokane, Washington native and U.S. Army colonel was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013 and has spent a total of 204 days in space and completed 2 spacewalks totaling 13 hours and 8 minutes. She's very competent and, as you've described, a very excellent leader.
Absolutely a natural leader, and it is so thrilling to be here watching her do what she was born to do and leading this crew to space today.
Sitting next to her is the pilot for Crew-10, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. She was selected as a NASA astronaut in 2021. The Colorado native graduated from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and is a major in the U.S. Air Force. This is her first space flight, and she's pretty excited about it.
Absolutely.
Takuya Onishi. He is the JAXA astronaut serving as a mission specialist. Today's flight will mark Onishi's second trip to the space station. He was selected as an astronaut by Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency in 2009 and has logged 113 days in space, and he will eventually be the station commander.
Yeah, that will be a very nice moment to see as Anne hands over those leadership reins over to Tak. Transfer of controls from her as the commander of the SpaceX vehicle over to Tak to be commander of the space station. So great opportunity for leadership for both of these experienced crew members.
And the second mission specialist is Kirill Peskov. The Roscosmos cosmonaut was selected as a cosmonaut in 2018 and will be also making his first space flight today.
This is really the ultimate of Kirill's very curious and adventurous nature. I hear he loves to discover all aspects of and areas of Russia and the U.S. now in his SUV, and he is always exploring, so this will be the ultimate of his exploration today for him and for all of his crew.
And all four of these crew members are pilots. They speak that common language of aviation. That must be comforting to all of them.
I think so, and I think it has brought them closer together as a crew. They can almost read each other's minds, they say. Sometimes, they don't even need words, and they have this shared sentiment, this shared language. It makes them a very synchronous, cohesive crew.
And for the past year and a half, that crew has been training diligently to be ready to help conduct science investigations aboard station. The crew will perform biomedical research and technology demonstrations over the 4-month expedition. Commander Anne McClain is participating in the Canadian Space Agency space experiment involving heart health.
This headband is actually connected to sensors throughout my body, and they are collecting real-time data on my heart rate, oxygen saturation, and my respiratory rate. Imagine the day where you go see your doctor because you're concerned about your heart health, and they give you these sensors to wear, and they get this massive, comprehensive look at your cardiovascular health over multiple days doing multiple activities.
Another science investigation on board involves tiny materials inspired by our own DNA that could help be used here on Earth with those people who suffer from arthritis in their knees. Let's go back to Megan Cruz, who is standing by with NASA Acting Administrator Janet Petro.
Yeah, that's right. Acting administrator since January, and then, of course, before that, center director here at Kennedy since 2021. And how does it feel to be back here to watch another crew launch?
Oh my God, I can't, Megan, tell you how excited I am to be here. And I was here the whole week. We had unfortunately had the scrub on Wednesday, but I cannot explain the feeling of coming back home. I love this center. I love this workforce. I love the mission that we have here at the center. So it was very exciting. In D.C., it's not my normal job jar down here at the Kennedy Space Center being center director where, I had the workforce and the mission. So I'm super excited to be back here and to be able to witness this launch later tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Launch is going to happen here shortly. And, I know we've been talking about this a lot in the broadcast that every single member of Crew-10 is a pilonaut. Yes, actually. A pilot, as are you. Did you get to talk to the crew? I see that they've signed your hat.
I absolutely did. So I got to see them a couple times. So when they landed at the landing facility here, I got to see them and greet them. And that's where they gave me this hat, which is so cool. I've never gotten a present from a crew before. So Crew-10, hats off to them for giving me, and they did sign it. And then on Tuesday, we got to go what's called Behind the Glass tour and talk to them. They're behind a glass because they're in quarantine, and we got to talk to them and ask them questions and talk to them and just see how they were doing, and so that's pretty special. So I got to talk to all of them, all of those pilots there, and they are super excited, ready to go.
Yeah, and speaking of excited, you know, we have NASA astronauts Suni Williams, Butch Wilmore, Nick Hague, plus Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. They're going to come back shortly after Crew-10 arrives on station. During a live press conference from station recently, Butch and Suni said they're going to miss space.
Absolutely, because you got to think about the astronauts. And by the way, last week from Johnson Space Center's Mission Control, I did get to talk to Butch, Suni, Nick, and a little bit to Don Pettit there, so I got to talk to them as well. But you got to figure they, to be selected and trained and the passion that they have to go to space, you know, for them, it's got to be, this is what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. This is what they're going to do. And in fact, I would bet they might have some mixed emotions for leaving, because, you know, every time you get to go to space, which is what all astronauts want to do, you never know. It might be your last time because you might not be selected for another mission or whatever. So I bet they have mixed emotions leaving their colleagues up there at the space station. I'm sure they're anxious to get home and put their feet on Earth and spend time with their family, but I think that they have enjoyed their time in space. You know, when I said behind the glass to Butch and Suni a while ago, I asked them, and they had told me that they hope they get to stay a little bit longer than 8 days in space. That was at their behind the glass. Now, I don't know if they meant to stay as long as they got to, but I know that they are a valued member of this expedition crew, and they've done amazing research. They've done spacewalks together. I think Suni now holds a record for the most amount of time in the vacuum of space. So they have to be very, very proud of what they've accomplished. They were very much integrated as a crew and did a lot of work on the station, research and science experiments. And so, yeah, I think they're going to miss space. I think so.
Well, Janet, no mixed emotions here. It was great seeing you. I'm going to put this in a jar of memories of today because this was wonderful, and we're about to see lunch.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Janet.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. We'll send it back to Daryl and Jessica.
All right, thank you both. And just behind them, as you saw in that shot, was the Vehicle Assembly Building, a very iconic building here at NASA, where we recently reached a major milestone in NASA's Artemis program. That's, of course, preparing for the first crewed mission around the moon in over 50 years. Engineers finished stacking the twin solid rocket boosters for Artemis 2. These 177-foot-tall boosters will provide most of the 8.8 million pounds of thrust needed to launch 4 astronauts on a 10-day lunar journey. There's a shot of the core stage, which they're starting to work on now. Since November, crews have used a massive crane to lift and assemble those booster segments. They're each packed with avionics and motors that will safely detach after launch. Now, with the completion of that, they're going to focus on the SLS. Artemis 2 will carry NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Christina Cook, along with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, on a mission around the moon. So here's Jeremy now with a little more about that.
Hey everyone, I'm Canadian Space Agency astronaut Colonel Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist for the Artemis 2 mission. I'm here at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas, where we normally do most of our training. But every once in a while, we like to change it up a bit. Reed, Victor, Christine, and I recently spent several days in Iceland trading in our spacesuits for hiking gear to study its geology and surroundings. Why Iceland? Well, as you can see, it has a similar landscape and terrain to the moon, with various volcanic rocks like basalts and breccias, and has limited to no vegetation. The Nordic island has been a lunar training site for NASA astronauts since the days of the Apollo missions. My crewmates and I teamed up with scientists and geology experts to explore the huge boulders, formations, and volcanic craters across the lava fields. During our journey, we stopped at various spots to discuss what we observed.
Some of the really fine material is compacting into what's like the glue holding this together.
And even tested different types of tools to collect rock samples. Although we won't be landing on the moon during our mission, this field work and navigation practice will allow us to make informed observations when passing the lunar surface and pave the way for future Artemis crew training. And that's your Artemis Moon Minute.
For more Artemis updates, scan the QR code on your screen right now, or visit nasa.gov /Artemis Roman numeral 2 or II. You don't have to worry about getting updates there, though, because, Jessica, you are friends and former classmates with both Victor Glover and Christina Cook.
Yeah, that's right. They are my astronaut classmates, like brothers and sisters, and it has been so exciting to see this Artemis journey. I was here for the Artemis 1 launch, and that just made it all so real. We saw the hardware, we saw the vehicle, we saw the launch, and we knew that the next time that vehicle launched, it would be with my friends and colleagues on board. So it was an incredibly exciting moment for all of us as astronauts.
That launch coming in February of 2025, currently scheduled on the calendar. Let's go back now to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Daryl. As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking Crew-10 to the International Space Station today. Falcon 9 is a two-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It's also the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. And sitting at the top of Falcon 9, Dragon and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are two windows on the spacecraft, plus one underneath the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight, and the trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo. Now, Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the space station. There are currently 4 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions that have docked to the station. There you can see them on your screen. That is Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, and Freedom. Now, designed to be the safest spacecraft ever flown, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond.
And Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit. Dragon has flown 49 times with 15 human spaceflight missions since 2020, when Dragon became the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. In that time, Dragon has flown over 1,000 experiments to space and 56 crew members representing 14 different countries.
Dragon has proven to be a versatile spacecraft. It can autonomously dock to the space station when outfitted with the International Space Station docking adapter, as it is for today's flight. When it's not going to the space station and in free flyer mode, the docking adapter can be swapped out for a cupola. Another option that we have is the Skywalker hardware, which supports extravehicular activities as the crew used during the Polaris Dawn mission. Now, continuing down the vehicle, we do have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC engine, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. After stage separation, the MVAC will ignite and carry Dragon to its target orbit. Now, the Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected by the black inner stage, which houses the MVAC engine and the system that decouples the 2 stages during stage separation. And below that is the first stage.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
Good call out. Stage 2 LOX loading has begun. Below that is the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift.
Dragon SpaceX reporting that we continue to track no issues with Dragon or Falcon proceeding to launch.
SpaceX Dragon, copy.
Great news, just calling out that we're tracking no issues. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off of the ground through the lower, thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Now, each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust.
And after stage separation, stage 1 will return to Earth for recovery and reuse on a future mission using a combination of the Merlin sea level engines and the 4 titanium grid fins located near the top of the booster, which will guide it during its re-entry and landing. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy and allow for vertical landing on a drone ship or landing pad. Now today we will be attempting to return the booster to land at landing zone 1. The second stage will power Dragon into its initial low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station using its own thrusters. About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing the guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station. With T0 coming up in just under 15 minutes, our teams are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready to go.
And we are still looking good for an on-time launch today. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy. As we continue to listen and watch the countdown, our teams are preparing the vehicle for flight. Propellant loading of both RP1 and liquid oxygen began at T-minus 35 minutes. And we also heard the call a few minutes ago that the launch escape system is armed. The launch escape system is designed to propel Dragon away from Falcon 9 in the event of an emergency during launch. Now, the range, which is monitoring the keep-out zones among other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues, and they are go to support today's launch.
And weather also continues to look good. You can see it there on your screen, clear skies. And we are still tracking a roughly less than 5% chance of violation at our target liftoff time of 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. And as you heard earlier, we're continuing to be optimistic that we're going to maintain these good conditions into launch. And as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window driven by our planned rendezvous point, the point at which Dragon and station will meet in orbit. The station is orbiting the Earth at more than 17,000 miles per hour, and Dragon needs to catch up. That means we have to deliver Dragon to the correct orbit by timing its trajectory relative to the orbiting laboratory so that they are in the same place in orbit at the same time. So precise liftoff time is crucial for hitting that rendezvous point. And at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we would have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity, which is Saturday, March 15th at 6:41 p.m. Eastern, 3:41 p.m. Pacific. But again, everything and all the systems continue to be go. And for now, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary at the Johnson Space Center for a quick status update from Houston.
Hey, thank you, Anna. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, teams continue to work around the clock to monitor activities aboard the orbital outpost. Leading the teams inside the room is Flight Director T.J. Creamer. The team in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will track the autonomous docking of Dragon Endurance when they enter joint operations. This will happen when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, the invisible boundary stretching 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers that helps us monitor all arriving and departing spacecraft, is essentially the neighborhood of the space station. Once docked, crew members in both Dragon and aboard the station will perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the spacecraft's hatch for Crew-10 to float into the station and begin their stay. We anticipate that the hatch will be opened about an hour and a half after the docking. When they enter the orbital outpost, Crew-10 will be greeted by the rest of their Expedition 72 crew and will come together for opening remarks. That's all from us here in Mission Control as the anticipation continues to build for launch in under 20 minutes. How's it looking on the Space Coast, Daryl?
We're looking great, Gary. Looking fantastic. We've got fantastic weather, 95% go. You see the beautiful shot outside of the pad there, the rocket and the spacecraft. When it launches today, the crew aboard the ISS, the destination for today's launch, will be about 260 miles over top of the west coast of Australia. So too far to see the launch. It's nice to see a rocket go off when you're on the ISS, but unfortunately it won't be the case this time.
Oh, yeah, it is a wonderful thing to see when your crewmates are heading towards you. I remember a photograph that Christina Cook took of my Soyuz approaching the station, and one of these incredible opportunities that you could see the outline of the trajectory of the Soyuz as it approached, and it's such a beautiful image. It's a shame they won't be able to see it, but they will be so excited to have their crewmates come on board.
And we're about to hear from the crew here before launch. We'll hear from them after launch. It'll be special. They have some important things to say.
Oh, absolutely. I am very excited to hear these final thoughts coming from the entire crew right before launch.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll send it back to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Daryl. Our next major milestone on the countdown event will be around the T-minus 10-minute mark, which is just in about 5 seconds, when Falcon 9 launch commit criteria get checked by computers.
Dragon, SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, displays are configured for launch. And with that, this is the pilot, Nicole Ayers. And on behalf of Crew-10, we'd like to say that today we celebrate the countless individuals all over the world that have made this journey possible. To the engineers, instructors, flight controllers, scientists, and leaders who worked tirelessly to get us here, thank you for your dedication to the safety and success of this mission. And a special thank you to our friends and families for your unwavering love and support. This mission is a testament of what humans can achieve when we work together. Go Crew-10!
Such great words from the crew. Again, and some cheering going on. You can see that on your screen.
SpaceX copies. And from the entire SpaceX team here, it's been a pleasure working together to prepare for this mission. And from all of us, good luck, Godspeed, go Crew-10, and enjoy the ride.
Great comms. That was from our core here in Hawthorne in Mission Control. Now, there are many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and the crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight. And now that we are in terminal count, our teams are performing those final checks before launch.
And coming up here in just a few minutes, we will start having that stage 1 engine chill start. And now we're just over 8 minutes away from launch. Again, today's ride to orbit will be about 9 minutes, which is from the time of liftoff to second stage cutoff. And then Dragon in the second stage will continue to coast for a few minutes after that prior to separation. You'll hear some performance calls along the way as we get into the final countdown and then after liftoff. And these are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones. So some of the callouts you will hear after liftoff are a combination of letters and numbers, which will mark different abort zones throughout the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two are 1 Alpha and 1 Bravo, which are abort modes available while the first stage is firing. And then the next round of numbers and letters you'll hear are 2 Alpha through 2 Echo, though you'll only hear the 2 Alpha call on the public loops, and those will come into play once the second stage kicks in. And then diverting a little bit from the other naming system, you will hear the call out Shannon, which refers to Shannon, Ireland. And this call means the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort late in the second stage burn. And you'll continue to hear those different call outs along with key performance call outs from the guidance, navigation, and control officer along with the propulsion lead. We're now just under 7 minutes away from launch.
Engines are chilling in for flight.
And we just heard that confirmation that the stage 1 engine chill has started.
Yeah, exactly. That call out is because we are flowing a little bit of liquid oxygen into the engines. That's to help prepare the vehicle or the engines for the full flow of liquid oxygen into the engines. That makes sure that we don't shock the system at that full flow. Now we are still loading. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming about 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us prevent that thermal shock into the engine. So again, we have passed that T-minus 7 minute mark. Next call out will be stage 1, RP1 loading complete, which we just heard that.
And the RP1 is densified kerosene or rocket fuel that will propel the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is now fully loaded into the rocket, and since we previously heard that second stage loading was completed. We are still loading the liquid oxygen or LOX onto the first and second stages, and this is the oxidizer needed to combine with the densified kerosene that just finished loading. The RP1 liquid propellant needs an oxidizer to combine with in order to ignite. Coming up in just under 30 seconds at that T-minus 5 minute mark, we will hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power.
Tanks are pressing for strong-back retract.
Correct, and then configure for terminal count.
And there we just heard that call out for terminal count. So now Dragon onboard computers will take control of the spacecraft. And we also heard that the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional structural support to the rocket as we get ready for that strong back to retract. And that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines.
Has started.
That strong back lower has now started, and again, that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for both propellant load and the different gases being loaded on board.
And what you should see on your screen is there's those clamp arms that are around the second stage just below Dragon. They're going to open up, and once they're fully open, then that strong back, or the TE, can begin to recline away from the vehicle. Now, initially, we are going to recline that TE just about 2 degrees away from the vehicle, and then we will fully move the TE about 45 degrees away up at T0. And they're maybe a little hard to see on your screen, but the clamp arms are opening up there. There's a better view. Looks like the clamp arms are now fully open, so that TE will begin to move away from the vehicle. Very slow and slight, but just enough to get two degrees away from the vehicle.
And then coming up in less than 30 seconds at the T-3 minute mark, the first stage liquid oxygen or LOX load will complete. And we'll continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones, including one around the T-2 minute mark before flight, where we'll hear liquid oxygen loading is complete on the second stage. And now you see all of those white clouds on your screen. Those are clouds of vapor, and they're completely normal, and we'll see them continue to build up as we get closer to launch. This is because liquid oxygen is super chilled, so a little of it will boil off in the warmer Florida air.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
Great call out there. Stage 1.
Count and on.
Putting liquid oxygen onto stage 2, and that'll wrap up here at the T-2 minute mark, just about 20 seconds from now. And once we finish propellant loading, that will mean that 1 million pounds of RP1 and liquid oxygen will be loaded onto Falcon 9 here, just under 10 seconds.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
We just heard confirmation that the stage 2 liquid oxygen loading is now complete. We are under 2 minutes away from launch. Gas closeout has also begun. So we're now isolating all of the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. And those gases will then get vented overboard through umbilicals and the strong back. And you just heard that call out that Dragon is an
Ground gas
aisle.
closeouts, expect loud venting.
Well, you can hear that venting now. Obviously, rockets are very loud, and the sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. The ton of water absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the rocket. And that call out for auto idle puts the rocket in a state the flight computers understand before it takes over, making sure the transition to final countdown is smooth and all the flight computers on board are in sync and configured for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And now we just heard that Falcon 9 is in startup.
Correct, countdown.
And in the final countdown, less than a minute to go, and at the time of launch, the space station will be flying 260 statute miles over the west coast of Australia.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
And great call out.
SpaceX, Dragon Crew-10, copy, go for launch.
Great call out that we're go for launch, and we do have a large crowd here in front of Mission Control.
T-30 seconds.
Waiting to watch Crew-10 take off today.
T-15. T-10. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go NASA
1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-10. And we're continuing to get good call-outs on the first stage performance so far. We're now 40 seconds into today's flight.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Continuing to get good performance call-outs.
Throttle down.
Yeah, we are throttling down the engines in preparation for Max Q. What great timing that was. We just passed through Max Q. That's the largest structural load that the vehicle will see on ascent.
Vehicle supersonic.
Stage 1, throttle up.
We're now just over 1 minute and 10 seconds into today's flight, traveling at more than 1,400 miles per hour.
Stage 1 Bravo.
And we just heard that
SpaceX
call out
copies, 1
for
Bravo.
1 Bravo, which means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. And the crew already pulling over 2 Gs. Next up, we'll have a couple of events happening in rapid succession.
Back chill started.
First will be that engine chill on the second stage impact engine, which we just heard. And then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and second stages will be separating from one another. Then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry Crew-10 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Now we're just 2 minutes into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling just under 4,000 miles per hour.
We're just about 20 seconds away from those events that Anna just mentioned. The 9 Merlin engines will shut down here in just about 10 seconds for MECO, stage separation, and SES-1.
Main engine cutoff.
SpaceX Dragon, 2 Alpha.
Stage separation confirmed.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
Great call-outs and incredible views there on your left-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, you can see a view from stage 1. And an extremely excited crowd here in Hawthorne. Awesome views of that boost back burn on the first stage, as well as the MVAC engine igniting on the second stage. Great views there. Now the booster is in its boost back burn. This is the first of 3 burns as it makes its way back down to Earth. This will last about 45 seconds. And the Crew-10 crew is still on board Dragon, attached to Falcon 9's second stage, which you can see there on your right-hand screen.
And we're now at 3 minutes and 20 seconds into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling about 6,500 miles per hour. And they are on their way to the space station. And we did have that confirmation coming up of the boost back shutdown. And then coming up at the T+6 minute mark. And there we have our first images of the crew inside the Dragon spacecraft as they make their way into orbit. And the crew
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
continuing to get good call-outs.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
Stage 2, it continues to be on power with in its firing until we get to that second stage engine cutoff around the 9-minute mark of flight. About 5 minutes of flight to go before Dragon will be flying free.
Some cool views there on your left-hand screen. That's the first stage booster as it's making its way back down to Earth. This is a ground tracking camera getting these awesome views.
And on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see that lone Merlin vacuum engine of the second stage. We're continuing to get good performance on the second stage. And the crew's G-loads will dip right when we hit the separation events, and it's going to continue to build up until then.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
We're now at 5 minutes into today's flight. with a liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Pacific, 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. Continuing to get good call-outs as Stage 1 makes its way back to Earth, and Stage 2 continues to fire, propelling Dragon into orbit.
If you're just now joining us, the 4 members of Crew-10 launched from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and they're currently on board Dragon, still attached to Falcon 9's second stage, which you're seeing there on your right-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, the first stage vehicle is making its way back down to Earth. It already completed the first of 3 burns as the boost back burn, and the next event coming up for that vehicle is going to be the entry burn.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Great call-outs there. That entry burn is coming up.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
That entry burn is coming up here in just under 20 seconds. We'll reignite 3 of those 9 Merlin 1D engines to help slow the vehicle down as it makes its way back into the Earth's atmosphere.
We're now just over 6 minutes into today's flight as Dragon and the second stage continue traveling at over 12,000 miles per hour, making their way into orbit and on the way to the International Space Station.
There we just saw on the screen, it was very quick, but we had the entry burn, which we got some cool views of that from the ground, which is awesome. Now the next event coming up will be the landing burn for the first stage. That's coming up here in about 30 seconds.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Again, great call outs for
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
Confirmation there from the crew as they continue to make their way into orbit. Now 7 minutes into today's flight, the first stage making its way back down to Earth and the second stage continuing to fire.
This is an awesome view. Let's see if we can see the center engine relight for that landing burn here in a few seconds. There's that landing burn. Let's watch as Falcon 9 touches down on landing zone 1.
And now that the first stage has made its way back to Earth, we're about a minute away from the second engine cutoff, which we're expecting around the 9-minute mark of today's flight. We're continuing to get good call-outs, and Dragon and all of the systems on the vehicle are performing as expected. Just over 8 minutes into today's flight, traveling more than 21,000 miles per hour.
Terminal guidance.
Hearing good call-outs. We're about 30 seconds away from that second engine cutoff, and then shortly after that, about a minute or so later, we will have orbital insertion.
SpaceX Dragon, Shannon.
SpaceX copy, Shannon.
And that call out there for Shannon, and that is the call out for Shannon, Ireland, which is the final abort stage for the second stage off the coast of Ireland. Standing by for a second engine cutoff.
And back shutdown.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
And there we heard confirmation
Launch
of
escape system disarmed.
good confirmation of orbital insertion. Crew-10 is now well on their way to the International Space Station following a 9.5-minute flight uphill.
Now, the second stage is preparing for Dragon separation here, which should happen shortly. In about 10-15 seconds is what we're expecting. Now we're preparing for stabilizing the second stage so that we can have a smooth separation.
And there you can see on the left-hand side of your screen wild. There on your screen, you can see that Dragon separation, that second stage making its way, and Dragon is now flying free. 10 minutes into today's flight, that was about a minute after we had that second engine cutoff and orbital insertion. And it looks like a good separation, good rates. Dragon now flying free. There on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see some first images of Crew-10 inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as they're now successfully in orbit.
Dragon, SpaceX, Chief Engineer on Countdown 1. On behalf of the entire Falcon team, we thank you for flying with Falcon and wish you a great mission. Over to LD.
It was an honor flying with you this evening. We wish you well on your journey and give Crew 9 our best. Thank you for flying SpaceX.
SpaceX Dragon, this is Crew-10 Commander Ann McClain. Thank you to all of the teams from across the world who contributed to the launch today. Spaceflight is tough, but humans are tougher. Days like today are made possible only when people choose to do the harder right over the easier wrong. Build relationships, choose cooperation, and believe in the inherent goodness of all people across the world. To my family and friends, without you, I would not be here. Explore boldly, live gracefully, go Crew-10. And over to pilot Nicole Ayers.
Pilot Nicole Ayers again. We are not the first humans to get to orbit, and we wouldn't be here without the bravery and hard work of those who have paved the way for human spaceflight. We now get the unique perspective of Earth without borders and get to revel in the connectedness of humanity. I would be remiss to not once again acknowledge those who helped me get here, to this wonderful view and this perspective, to the teachers, coaches, fellow officers, fellow teammates, Raptor Nation, to my friends and family that encouraged my dreams from the start. Thank you. I wouldn't be here without you.
This is Mission Specialist Takuya Onishi. I want to say a huge thank you to NASA and SpaceX, especially the Falcon 9 team for the successful launch, and we are looking forward to a smooth ride to the International Space Station. 日本の皆さん、たくさんの応援ありがとうございます。9年ぶりの無重力の感覚をかみしめてます。これから先の ISS への宇宙の旅、楽しんでいきたいと思います。I will now hand the mic over to Mission Specialist Kirill.
Thanks a lot to NASA and SpaceX for this wonderful ride, and I want to say a couple of words in Russian. Пользуясь такой чудесной возможностью, хочу поздравить с 65-летием со дня начала подготовки первого отряда. И также хочу сказать спасибо большое за те знания и жизненный опыт, который мной были получены в всех стенах для того, чтобы выполнить этот полет. А также спасибо школе номер 14 города Назарова, Ульяновскому высшему авиационному училищу гражданской авиации и авиакомпании «Макар» и «Нордвин», где я начинал свой путь в небо. И, конечно же, спасибо большое семье и за поддержку.
Thank you, Crew-10. At this time, I can report nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts.
SpaceX Dragon, copy.
And such great words from Crew-10 as well as the Corps here in Hawthorne and Mission Control. We also got confirmation that the nose cone deploy is underway. The 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during the launch and ascent portions have to retract, and then the nose cone will be able to start to swing open and deploy. Now, this uncovers a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Just pausing in case there were going to be any comms. And we did have good confirmation, good checkouts of the 12 Draco thrusters around the service section. Now, 4 to go after we get the nose cone open, and then the ECLIS, the environmental control and life support system, activated inside of Dragon. Now, soon the crew will be able to get their visors open and get out of their suits and settle in for the ride to the space station.
And now we're just waiting for confirmation that the nose cone has fully deployed with all of the hooks open. But just to recap a little bit, we did have a successful liftoff of Crew-10 about 18 minutes ago at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. And following an approximately 9-minute ride after liftoff, we had that orbital insertion, and Dragon and Crew-10 were flying free and well on their way to the International Space Station. They now have an approximately a 28-hour journey before they do reach their destination of the space station, and that docking is targeted for tomorrow, March 15th at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, 11:30 p.m. Eastern, to the forward-facing port of the station's Harmony module. Between now and then, Dragon will perform a series of burns as it catches up to the space station, and that first burn will be a phase burn about 30 minutes from now at 4:52 p.m. Pacific, 7:52 p.m. Eastern.
And the nose cone is about 75% open at this point. Human spaceflight has come so far in the last 5 years with Dragon. In addition to flying people, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. And so far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried over 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions. From DNA sequencing to 3D printing studies enabled by Dragon and the space station tests Dragon and the space station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Now, every mission yields critical science and research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay this foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary.
Once Crew-10 does arrive to the International Space Station, they will, of course, partake in some additional science and research. They will have over 200 experiments that they will contribute to during their time aboard the International Space Station. Again, we're just standing by for confirmation that that nose cone has fully deployed. And we may also get some additional look inside the cabin of the crew.
As we patiently wait for those views, we are trying to see if we can get some views. We were seeing some views from the second stage. This looks like it might be a view from the forward.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal nose cone opening and forward bulkhead Draco checkouts.
SpaceX Dragon copies and confirm nominal ECLIS activation and go for visors.
There we heard confirmation that the nose cone has fully deployed and that the crew is now able to lift their visors. And there, again, we're seeing some views inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft with Crew-10 on their way to the International Space Station.
Affirm, you are go to open visors.
Copy.
Great calls there. They're go to open visors, which means that shortly they'll also be able to get out of their suits and get comfortable for the entire ride on Dragon to the International Space Station.
And from left to right on your screen, there's Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, NASA astronaut Nicole, Ayers, NASA astronaut McClain, and then far on the right-hand side of your screen is JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi.
And there you could see that they are in microgravity as their tablets are floating around there. They do have them attached to a little string that helps allow them so that, you know, as they're strapped into their seats, they don't lose their tablets.
We're now just over 20 minutes into today's flight following that successful liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. There you're getting an over-the-shoulder view between the commander and pilot, so Ann McClain and Nicole Ayers.
If you're just now joining us, you are watching live Crew-10 out in space in the Dragon vehicle. They lifted off from Space Launch Complex 39A at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time.
Dragon SpaceX, there are about 3 minutes remaining in the current ground station pass. At this time, you're welcome to introduce your zero-G indicator. We're using the full crew cam so we can see all 4 crew members right now.
All right, copies. Thank you, SpaceX. We'd like to introduce the Crew-10 G indicator. Takuya is holding him up. This is a hand crochet origami crane. The Japanese origami, hand crocheted in the United States, and his name is Drug, which is the Russian name for friend. Origami is the Japanese art of folding paper. This is a nod to the unique and deep cultural traditions from which each of us come. While we're from different parts of the world, we are brought together in this bold endeavor, and we represent all of humanity. The folded paper design was also chosen to represent paper airplanes that we made when we were kids, before we were astronauts, when all we had was a dream. And we looked up at the sky and we wondered, what if? It's a symbol that every big accomplishment starts with a quiet dream, and that dreams do come true when you believe in yourself and you listen only to those who believe in you. Crew-10 believes in all of the dreamers. The flag and the number markings on the crane, there's a number 10 on each of its wings and a flag from each one of our countries on the tail. This is a nod to each of our shared experiences as professional pilots. These patches are arranged to look like an airplane. This is a source of deep pride for our crew, because what pilot doesn't like to talk about the fact that they're a pilot? But this also symbolizes our shared culture as astronauts. In the years of training together, we found we have far more in common than we do different. Our zero-G indicator was handmade by a small business owner in the United States. This represents all the hands which created our entire space program, and this rocket and this capsule that we're flying today. It also represents all of the artists and musicians who inspire people to imagine beyond what they can see. Spaceflight is perhaps the most complex endeavor of our time, but it was built one step at a time, by one person at a time. Finally, the origami crane is the international symbol for peace, hope, and healing. Crew-10 hopes to serve as a beacon of hope, a reminder of what humans can accomplish when we see the goodness in one another and we choose to work together toward a common goal. Today, we are united not through common enemy, but through shared optimism and a basic belief in the goodness of humanity. It is far easier to be enemies than it is to be friends. It's easier to break partnerships and relationships than it is to build them. Spaceflight is hard, and success depends on leaders of character who choose the harder right over the easier wrong, and who build programs, partnerships, and relationships. We explore for the benefit of all. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, then go together. Crew-10 chooses to go together in peace, because you cannot be great without the greatness of others. Go NASA, go Roscosmos, go JAXA, and go Crew-10.
Dragon SpaceX, we really appreciate those words, Ann. Thanks for introducing.
From NASA astronaut and the Crew-10 commander and McClain. And again, Crew-10 comprised of McClain along with NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are now safely in orbit following an approximately 9-minute ride after a liftoff at 4:03 p.m. Pacific, 7:03 p.m. Eastern from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The crew now has an approximately 28-hour journey ahead of them before they reach their destination, the International Space Station. Again, docking is targeted for tomorrow, March 15th at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, 11:30 p.m. Eastern to the forward-facing port of the station's Harmony module. Between now and then, Dragon will perform a series of burns to catch up with the space station, and that first burn will be taking place around 4:52 p.m. Pacific, 7:52 p.m. Eastern today.
And those were some great words about the zero-G indicator. Very incredible. Human spaceflight has come so far in the last 5 years with Dragon. In addition to flying people, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. Now, so far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried over 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions. From DNA sequencing to 3D printing, studies enabled by Dragon and the space station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Every mission yields critical research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay the foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary. Now, we'll be signing off from SpaceX for now, so we're going to send it back to NASA. But before we go, we want to thank NASA for entrusting us with today's mission, and thank you all for being here with us today.
And with that, we're going to end our coverage from Hawthorne until we pick back up with our docking coverage in about 26 hours at 6:45 p.m. Pacific, 9:45 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, March 15th, for that targeted docking to the International Space Station at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. So for now, thank you for joining us, and back over to you, Jessica and Daryl at the Kennedy Space Center to wrap up today's coverage.
And welcome back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where we just watched Crew-10 lift off from Launch Pad 39A. The crew is now en route to the International Space Station. I'm Daryl Nail. This is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, who just watched one of her close friends and many friends, Crew-10, go up into space. And I'm wondering what that moment was like for you.
Well, I will tell you, it is a moment that you never forget. I am so excited right now sitting here thinking especially of Nicole and Kirill, because that first time experiencing prolonged weightlessness is something that they will never forget, and they will be talking about it for years and years for the rest of their lives, just like I recounted my stories here tonight. Those words were all so inspirational as well. I love how they unveiled their droog, their origami crane. It really hit on so many important themes tonight, talking about this Japanese art of folding paper, really combining all of the cultures of their crew, the name being a Russian name meaning friend, the origami crane for Japanese culture, all of the flags on the crane handmade by a small business in the U.S. It really highlights so many important elements that I know are so important to the crew and to all of us at NASA and all of the space agencies. Ideally, really in summary, highlighting the representation of peace, of hope, and of healing, and that we are all truly stronger when we work together. So thank you, Anne. Thank you, Crew-10, for those incredible words. I think that there's a lesson there for all of us tonight. We are exploring for the benefit of all.
And Crew-10 believes in all dreamers. Thank you for highlighting the words of Commander Anne McClain as well. Crew-10 will become part of Expedition 73, briefly with 72, but then 73 when they arrive on the space station. NASA's Megan Cruz joins us now with Megan Everett, Deputy Chief Scientist of the International Space Station.
That's right, two Megans here, and I want to talk to you about, we obviously have another crew en route to the space station. How is the research that's done on the ISS different from other research at NASA?
Yes, well, first, thank you for having me. It's always my pleasure, and I'm very grateful to get to talk about science and space. And so, like you said, the space station is a national laboratory, and it allows us to look at things in microgravity for extended periods of time. We can put things on the outside of the space station where they experience extreme temperature changes and exposure to radiation in that extreme environment. And we also get these very unique perspectives of the Earth's surface. And so together, these things allow us to look at things like theories in quantum physics and answer questions that we can't answer with laboratories on Earth. We can look at human health and how that we can get astronauts to explore beyond low Earth orbit, as well as promote human health and answer questions related to diseases that we can't do on Earth. And it also allows us to expand commercialization in low Earth orbit by some of our in-space manufacturing. And in addition to this, it's just this really cool collaboration of international partners and scientific cooperation that we see on the space station.
Yeah, obviously a unique platform, and we do all that we can to really utilize it. So how does what we learn on the space station help us here on Earth? Can you give us some examples about that?
Yes, I love that question because one of NASA's big mission objectives is to figure out how we can do science in space to promote human health here on Earth. And one of the things we've been really successful with on ISS is looking at stem cell research and organelles and how those relate to specific diseases like cancer. And we also look at protein crystallization, and so we can grow very uniform crystals in space better than we can on Earth. And these crystals are really important in pharmaceutical drug development. So together we can look at disease progression and how we can better treat those diseases with new pharmaceuticals in space.
That's great. You did also mention human health and researching, what it could mean if we go farther and farther into the universe. How are we doing on that research? What are we learning?
So we've used ISS as a test bed for exploration beyond low Earth orbit for a long time, and we continue to use that, and we will all the way through end of station. And some of the specific things that we look at are how the human responds to long duration exposure to gravity. So we look at exercise countermeasures, at how we can maintain muscle and bone strength. We look at things like food systems for how we keep crew healthy for long periods of time. We have a very robust plant growth program, so we try to optimize crop output by changing things like soil and water exposure to those plants. And we need life support systems for our crew to live in space for long periods of time, so we have a lot of technical demonstrations on the space station looking at how to clean air and water and eliminate waste.
I can really see that you love talking about this. Thank you so much for sharing your passion and for sharing all that's being accomplished through NASA with the research at the ISS, but also other research that we do here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, back to Daryl and Jessica.
All right, thank you very much. And we're about to wrap up coverage here, so why don't we take one last social question from one lucky submitter. Scarlett Sermons asks, how do the astronauts feel looking at Earth from above? And what's that feeling like coming back?
Well, seeing the Earth from above is a very, very exceptional experience, and it's something that I think changes you forever. People have different things to say about this, but I think one message that we do all share is that it gives you this unique understanding for how beautiful our planet is, but mostly how unique and fragile it is. You see this beautiful gem below you and this tiny, tiny band, this thin, tenuous band of an atmosphere that's really supporting all life. And you realize that we need to take care of this planet, that it is one planet and we have to protect it. Secondly, one thing that I really was struck by was seeing how interconnected everything is. You see all of the land masses with no boundaries, you see all the continuous oceans, and you realize how connected everything is, how we really are just one human. We are all here together, in it together, as one. It's easy as humans to have these man-made imposed boundaries that we see delineated on the globe, but for us as astronauts, we realize that we are truly all in this together.
Well said, Jessica, and let's go ahead and end it on that. Right here on NASA Plus, you can follow us along with Crew-10's entire journey to the station by listening to real-time audio commentary of the mission. Just scan the QR code that you see right there at the bottom of your screen, or if you're watching us on your phone, you can just do a screen grab and then click on it later. Crew-10 is on course to arrive at the International Space Station around 11:30 p.m. on Saturday, believe that's going to be March 15th. On-camera coverage of docking and arrival will resume about 2 hours before it docks on NASA Plus. And of course, that's always a big moment when the crowd comes together on ISS.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have a lot of patience because you get to ISS, you dock, and then you have to go through these pressure checks to make sure everything's okay, and you're just waiting to get to the other side. And it's an incredibly special moment when you come through the hatch, you float for the first time for 2 of them, and you get big hugs from all of your friends and colleagues that are up there already.
And I was impressed by what Ann says, once they do this together, they are, and you've mentioned this a couple times, like forever brothers and sisters. When she sees those fellow astronauts in the hallway back in Houston, there's always a big smile that comes across her face.
Yeah, it's a bond that you have forever, spending that time in space together, having that shared experience. It's something as astronauts we want to share with our friends and family, how it feels, what it's like, and it's hard when they haven't experienced it. But with other astronauts and other cosmonauts, you have this instant special bond because you all have that shared experience together.
And when they return, they will come full circle with the rest of the astronauts, appropriately so on Pi Day. Just had to get that in there.
One more time, 3:14.
There you go. Well, I want to thank you, Jessica, for joining us. You were here for Crew-7. You did Crew-10, 2 launch attempts. It's a lot of work. We thank you for it. It's been very special. We hope that when you go on your mission and we are watching you and documenting your trip, that you'll throw us a little love somehow towards the camera, give us a wave, something. We will be rooting you on.
Absolutely, Daryl. It's been such a pleasure to be here sharing in the excitement for Crew-10 today. Go Crew-10.
Go Crew-10, go NASA, go SpaceX. And an important reminder about upcoming launches. NASA and SpaceX will return to the ISS in late April with CRS-32, a resupply mission launching from Kennedy, and then Crew-11 several months from now. Again, a huge thanks to all of us, for all of us, from all of us, to you, and to our guests for joining us today. But most importantly, thank you for watching. You can keep up with any Crew-10 updates to this mission using the online resources you see on your screen just there below. For everyone here at NASA and SpaceX, and for Jessica Meir, I'm Daryl Nail. Have a great rest of the day. We leave you now with a look back at highlights from Suit Up to Liftoff. Crew-10 is getting suited up, ready to go. Time now for the traditional card game. Crew-10 walking down the hallway. And here they come, taking their first steps outside as they prepare for their journey to the International Space Station. And we are off. The crew on their way to Space Launch Pad 39A. And McClain, Nicole, Ayers making their way into their Dragon spacecraft Endurance. And here come our mission specialists down the crew access arm, Takuya Onishi and Kirill Peskov.
There they are rotating back.
Dragon, SpaceX side hatches closed. Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go NASA Crew-10. Copy, 1 Alpha.
Vehicles busy downrange. Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-10. And we're continuing to get good call-outs on the first stage performance so far.